starting the spoilers from the original Spider-Man. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126. Inside the school, Parker closed his locker with his hood on and walked in the corridor. Gwen saw him and chased after him. Parker took off his hood when he saw her. "Hey, are you okay? Where are you going?" Gwen asked curiously. "I don't know what Parker is doing recently. I haven't seen him much. Monday, be subject," Parker said after thinking for a while. Gwen looked surprised and said, "Oh, today is Thursday." Parker was also a little surprised to hear this. Thursday. He was so busy chasing the murderer that he even confused the time. What's going on? Because Parker turned his head to look at her, she also saw the scar on Parker's face, so she asked worriedly, "What?" Parker didn't react to the scar on his face being seen by Gwen. "Your eye is injured." After Gwen reminded him, Parker remembered that there was still a scar on his face that had not been removed and hurriedly explained, "Oh, no, maybe it's a rash or..." Parker wanted to fool him, but Gwen was not stupid and would not be easily fooled by him. She stretched her head and looked at the wound on Parker's face carefully. "It's quite serious. Have you seen a nurse?" "Aha." Parker nodded, not wanting Gwen to worry about him. "Do you like to eat European sea bass? It's a kind of fish." Gwen looked at Parker and asked suddenly. "Aha, yes, I know." Although Parker had never seen it, he still pretended to know it. Gwen took out the paper and pen that she had prepared long ago, wrote down her home address on it, and handed it to Parker. "If you want, come to this place at 8 o'clock tonight. My mother wants to make European sea bass. So..." "Oh, the apartment number is 2016. I didn't write it down. I don't know why." Gwen suddenly turned around shyly and didn't dare to look at Parker. "I'll remember it. Okay. 2016. Gwen smiled sweetly and emphasized again. Just as the school bell rang, she went to class. "Oh yeah. Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy are really a perfect match." A woman with a little girl beside her looked at the two of them happily. "Mommy, do you think Spider-Man will like the pizza I sent?" This is the 18th time the little girl has asked this question. Every time she would answer that Peter Parker would definitely be satisfied, but the little girl would ask it again soon. Since the appearance of the Sky Curtain, CP has become one of the hobbies of many people. Although the CP of Tobey Spider and Mary Jane is not easy to be CP, many people are more optimistic about Gwen, but unfortunately Tobey Spider did not get together with the first generation Gwen in the Sky Curtain. Until the appearance of the second generation Gwen, the CP requirements of most people were met, so they began to CP. Sweet youth love stories are the memories of many people. In us industries, Carnes came to a mirror, stretched out his left hand, and with the help of the mirror reflection, it seemed that his right hand was still there. Carnes imagined that his right hand was still there, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. He made up his mind to use himself as a guinea pig for human experiments. He came to the laboratory, and Legitrator had not had time to cancel his authority. His ID card was still useful. He quickly made a tube of lizard potion through the instrument. Back in the office, Carnes looked at the potion in his hand and resolutely injected the liquid in the tube into the broken right arm. The injection of the lizard potion brought severe pain, and the intense pain caused him to faint directly on the chair. He is gambling. Tony and Banner frowned together. He injected the potion directly into his body without further experiments. He was betting that the potion would succeed directly without any problems, otherwise he would really have no chance to have an arm again. The price of this kind of heaven-defying potion must be extremely high. Legitrator said it very clearly. Carnes' life is not so rich, otherwise he would not have to wear a cheap suit. If he does not rely on internal supply, he may not be able to afford the lizard regeneration potion, so he can only take advantage of Legitrator's continued absence and take a gamble. If he succeeds, he will have a brand new arm, and if he fails, he will not be too bad. But Tony is not a biologist after all, and he does not understand the dangers of genetic modification, but Banner knows it very well. Connors knows what that elf is thinking, so he is not in a hurry. Let's see what happens to that elf first. Anyway, Legitrata has also been arrested, and he will not be at risk of being taken down for the time being. In addition, people around the world are now his praise value is very high, so he is not afraid that the new senior management will kick him out, because there are many companies that want to recruit him anyway. Gwen was lying on the bed reading a book. Parker jumped from the upstairs to the fire escape outside her window. He looked at Gwen, who was reading seriously through the window. Ding ding ding. Parker knocked on her window. She looked up and found that Parker was outside her window. She showed a surprised expression on her face and helped him open the window. Hey, how did you get here? Gwen was a little surprised because her floor was quite high. Fire escape. Your doorman is terrible. Parker gestured with his hand and made a joke. This is the 20th floor. Yeah, that's nothing. Parker entered the room from the window, glanced at it and said, "Is this your room?" "Yes, this is my room." Gwen smiled. "A lot of books and shoes." Gwen couldn't help laughing. She didn't expect Parker to come directly to her room, so she hadn't packed it yet. "Oh, listen, I prepared these for your mother." Parker suddenly remembered something, put down his backpack, and took out a bouquet of flowers. Unfortunately, several flowers had been broken, and Parker's expression became a little disappointed. "Wow, very beautiful," Gwen praised. Although a few flowers were broken, it still showed Parker's feelings. "Very beautiful, isn't it?" Parker couldn't help covering his face with the flowers, feeling a little ashamed to see people. "Yes," Gwen affirmed. "They were very beautiful just now." Parker smiled innocently. "They are still beautiful now." "Sorry," Parker said, covering his face. "No, very nice, fresh and beautiful." Gwen has a high and keeps praising Parker's flowers. "I'd better keep them." Parker put the flowers back into his backpack. Although Gwen said that, he really couldn't give such flowers to others. Chapter 127. "Is your suit in there?" Gwen asked curiously, looking at Parker's backpack. Hearing Gwen's words, Parker's smile froze. "Suit? I'll wear it for dinner." You want to wear this?" "This?" Gwen didn't expect Parker to know to wear flowers, but not to wear a suit. Just as she was about to speak, the door was pushed open. "Dear." George Stacy, dressed in a suit, pushed the door open and interrupted Gwen's words. George looked at Parker in the room in surprise. He didn't even know when Parker entered the room. "You must be Peter," George said after looking up and down. "Dad, this is Peter." Gwen was a little nervous. After speaking, she looked at Parker on the side. Parker was also a little nervous. He was stunned for a second and came back to his senses after seeing Gwen's eyes. He walked up and held out his hand and said, "Nice to meet you, sir." "Nice to meet you. Dinner is ready. I hope you like European sea base." George stared at Parker and said after they shook hands, "Who doesn't like it?" Although Parker had never eaten it, he didn't show any fear. Ha ha ha. Sneaking into the other party's daughter's room and being caught by the old father on the spot. "I guess this Peter must be confused." Ha ha ha. Otto laughed and slapped his thigh. "This is really funny." George Stacy's face is not good. He opened the door happily, and there was a kid who came out of nowhere inside. Dr. Otto couldn't help laughing, and Rose covered her mouth beside him. "I wonder if our Peter has experienced this scene. Next time he comes, I'll ask him." Ha ha ha. In the end, Otto couldn't help laughing again. George glared at Parker again at the door, but he didn't say anything. Parker scratched his head embarrassedly and smiled innocently. As soon as she entered the house, Parker's spider sense immediately responded. Gwen felt that she could not hide any movement around her and could not control her spider sense at all. Fortunately, with what Parker did in the bathroom, Gwen knew that she could not control her power well now, and she didn't dare to move. Parker came to her quickly, held her hand, and began to teach her how to control her ability. In the office, Connors, who had been unconscious for a long time, finally woke up. He subconsciously wanted to sit up straight. Years of habit made him ignore his right arm. Therefore, his newly grown arm was blocked by the table. Connors looked at his broken arm in disbelief and put it on the table. Seeing that the newly grown arm was wrapped in a layer of membrane, Connors was so excited that he twitched twice and carefully tore the membrane with his left hand. After removing the membrane from his palm, Connors stared at the 5 fingers on his palm with wide eyes. He quickly tore off all the mucous membranes on his fingers and admired his new arm. It was extremely flexible, as if it had always been there and had never been lost. He immediately wanted to stop Legitrator. Emma. This is Kurt. Is he there? He called Legitrator's secretary. No, doctor. He's taking a bus to the Veterans Hospital in Brooklyn. Emma answered on the other end of the phone. No, he can't do that. Emma, you have to stop him. Connors was talking when he suddenly felt a splitting headache and couldn't help covering his forehead with his hand. I can, but I always lose contact with him on the bridge. I'll let Dr. Latta return your call as soon as possible. Connors hung up the phone and felt that the headache was getting more and more obvious. He couldn't even stand steadily and fell to the ground. He forced himself to come outside the company and stopped a taxi. When he opened the door with his right hand, he suddenly found that his arm was mutating. He quickly opened the door with his left hand and got in. I want to go to Horton Street across the river. I'm in a hurry. Connors said to the driver while holding back his headache, and then looked at his right hand, which was mutating more and more seriously. Okay. Do you want to go through the tunnel or the bridge? The driver hadn't noticed Connors' abnormality at this time, but Connors' right hand had begun to grow sharp nails and the color had turned green. Bridge. Go through the bridge. Ah. The violent mutation reaction made Connors couldn't help but scream. The driver heard Connors' strange voice, tilted his head and asked, Hey, are you okay in the back? Are you addicted to drugs, buddy? Connors' mutation became more and more serious, and his neck and face began to turn into a green lizard point skin. The tone also began to become fierce. Drive your car. The driver heard his fierce tone, dared not ask any more questions, and hurriedly drove towards the bridge. I have to be glad that I didn't pursue the regeneration of my arm. The first generation. Connors looked at another mutated self on the sky and said with a face full of relief. His words caused laughter from many students in the classroom. Yeah, indeed. Dr. Connors realized that something was wrong and wanted to stop Dr. Atta, but I don't know if he can hold on. Can he change back to his original state? Toby Spider looked at the sky worriedly. The effect of the potion was very powerful, but the side effects were also extremely obvious. Dr. Connors not only mutated his arm, but his whole body was mutating. Connors was in a bad state. He had just injected the potion into Freddy. Thinking of this, he quickly picked up the cage that held Freddy, went to a laboratory, and put Freddy in a high-strength glass cover. Then he returned to the office and slumped in the chair. Now it was his turn to fall into the abyss. He took the bottle of lizard potion and wondered what went wrong. At the same time, the stock of Osmus Industries began to dive again. Those shareholders who were still expecting Osmus Industries to rely on the regeneration potion to save the situation were dumbfounded. It was too late to sell the stock at this time. Although Parker was helping Gwen adapt to her own strength, he had been paying attention to the sky. He also knew that Dr. Connors might be very confused at this time, and he felt that he needed to find him. With the help of Parker, Gwen walked around the house. Parker kept holding her hand, and he could bear it, even if Gwen accidentally used too much strength. Banner looked at the mutated Connors. He forgot a major problem, the gene ratio. Peter Parker said that it was obvious that he didn't listen, or he was too confident. The proportion of lizard genes in the potion may exceed the proportion of human genes, which is why the whole person mutated. But Dr. Banner didn't know to what extent he would mutate. Why did something go wrong again? Tony said speechlessly. Something would go wrong every time in scientific research. This time, Connors used him as a guinea pig and he mutated directly. Is that okay? Chapter 128. Parker holds a knife and fork and looks at the European sea base on the plate, not knowing where to start. It's a little hard to handle, isn't it? The fish head should be. Help Gwen's friend cut the fish. Gwen's mother saw Parker's appearance and knew that he had never eaten it before, so she asked her son to help. I have no idea. Parker was a little embarrassed, and Gwen whispered to him, European sea base. George. Tell us about what happened today. Mrs. Stacy asked. Have you caught the Spider-Man? Their youngest son asked. No. We haven't caught him yet, but we will catch him. He has little experience and attacks ordinary citizens in the middle of the night. He is clumsy and leaves a lot of clues, but he is still very dangerous. George Stacy took a bite of the fish and said lightly, and his words were quite disdainful of Spider-Man's performance. Hearing George's words, Parker was a little surprised. He attacked ordinary citizens? I'm not sure. I watched a video about him and the car thief. I think most people would think he was doing harm to the people. George looked at Parker and said, most people are wrong. If I wanted to catch the car thief, he would have been caught by the law long ago. Parker asked casually, then why is he still stealing cars? Seeing Parker still arguing with him, George looked at him unhappily. Gwen smiled awkwardly, and because of his daughter's presence, George couldn't get angry, so he could only explain. Let me explain it to you. The car thief will guide us to find the mastermind behind the scenes. This is a 6-month undercover operation. This is called strategy. I believe you know this word. Have you heard it in school? Yeah. Parker nodded, admitting that George made sense. Good. George nodded with satisfaction. Gwen smiled at her mother, who nodded and whispered, I know. Obviously he doesn't know you have a plan. Parker said to George, while taking a bite of fish. You seem to know a lot. Do you know something we don't know? Which side do you support? George narrowed his eyes at Parker. I don't support either side. I watched a video on the internet. Parker's words were interrupted by George. Oh. You watched a video on the internet and the case was solved. Oh no. If you watched that video, maybe I can send you a link. It looks like he wants to help. Parker tried to convince George, but it was obvious that George didn't agree with him. I'm sure he looks like a popular hero on the internet. George thought Parker might think he was a hero after watching a video. No. I'm not saying he's a hero. I don't think he is. Parker shook his hand and said, he is Spider-Man himself. How can he boast that he is a hero? But George didn't understand what Parker meant. So what do you want to say? I think he wants to help. He wants to do something that the police can't do. Parker's original intention was to help the police catch thieves, but he made it sound as if the police were incompetent, which caused George's dissatisfaction. What the police can't do? He narrowed his eyes and glared at Parker, his favorability towards Parker dropping again and again. What do you think we are doing? Sitting there eating donuts? Doing nothing? Seeing that the tension between the two was getting stronger and stronger, Gwen and Helen Stacy hurriedly stopped them and said, Dad, George. His son was a little curious to know what George was talking about. What are you talking about, Dad? Mrs. Stacy stopped her son's curiosity. Howard. Parker told George Stacy what he thought. I think he is on the same front as you, protecting innocent people from harm. I represent law and order. This is the meaning of the police. Okay. I wear a badge, and that guy wears a mask, like a gangster. He is chasing a group of criminals who look similar. It seems that he has a personal grudge. He is not protecting innocent citizens. Mr. Parker. George's words left Parker speechless, because as he said, what he wanted more was to catch the murderer. Gwen saw that the two of them were not getting along very well, so she decided to pull Parker out first to prevent the relationship between the two from becoming more strained. Let's go out for some fresh air, Peter. Then she said to George, Dad, we need to talk. That's right. George was not very happy with Parker. He did not understand why his daughter liked Peter Parker. He did not see any merits in him. Parker put down the cutlery and apologized to George. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very sorry if I offended you. It was not my intention. George replied lightly. You are welcome. The European sea base is delicious. Mrs. Stacy. Thank you. Parker stood up and thanked Mrs. Helen Stacy again. You are welcome. Compared with George, Helen Stacy's attitude towards Parker was much better. Oh. It seems that you and my father are not happy. Gwen sat down carefully with the help of Parker and said to Parker with a smile. Yeah. Actually, he is right. I'm not protecting innocent citizens. He is just chasing the murderer who killed Uncle Ben. Parker admitted that his thinking was a bit narrow. His purpose was revenge, not protecting citizens. At this time, George hurried in from the outside with a bag of rubber balls in his hand. This was a technique Parker came up with to help Gwen train her strength. Because just now Gwen had crushed a door handle, two cups, a spoon, a chair and her table, and she also knocked a dent in the wall with her elbow. Parker had to come up with this method to quickly let Gwen realize how much strength she should use to avoid hurting the furniture and other people. George took a ball from the bag and handed it to Gwen. The next second after Gwen took it and held it, the rubber ball burst. Wow. Parker's spider sense activated and dodged at the critical moment, but George's suit was covered with rubber fragments. "I'm sorry, Daddy." Gwen looked at George to see with an embarrassed face. George sighed helplessly and prepared to go out and take off his coat. Before leaving, he said to Parker, "Let her get used to her strength as soon as possible, Peter." He didn't want his good home to be smashed by Gwen. "Okay." Parker made an okay gesture, and then George closed the door. Helen Stacy pulled her two sons and whispered to George, "What's going on?" George pointed at the plasticine on his body and shrugged without saying anything. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129. Parker followed Gwen, and they came to the balcony together. Gwen said as she walked, "This is really unexpected." She didn't expect her father to have a disagreement with Parker because of Spider-Man. "I'm so sorry, I thought he was going to arrest me," Parker said from Spider-Man's perspective, but Gwen thought he was joking. So he laughed. "No, I won't let him arrest you. What happened to your face?" Gwen was still very curious about how Parker hurt his face. Parker pressed his whole body on the balcony, thought about it again and again, and decided to tell Gwen his true identity. "I want to tell you something." "Oh." Gwen looked at Parker in surprise. "Okay." Parker opened his mouth, hesitating because he hadn't thought about how to say it yet. "I was bitten." Parker regretted it after saying it, which Gwen couldn't understand at all. Gwen didn't know what Parker wanted to say, but she was very emotional and agreed. "Me too." The two got closer and closer, and Parker didn't dare to open his eyes to look at her. He closed his eyes and said, "Okay, okay, okay, I have something to tell you. This thing is related to vigilantes and car thieves." "Oh, okay. What is it?" Gwen looked at the somewhat incoherent Parker with a smile. No, I don't want to talk about that. Forget it. I won't talk about that." When Parker mentioned that thing, he remembered the conflict with George just now. "I want to talk about myself." "Okay. What's wrong with you?" Gwen didn't quite understand what Parker wanted to say. "This is very important. I hope I can." "No, it's hard to say." Parker wanted to say that he was Spider-Man, but he couldn't say it when he got to his lips. "Go ahead." Gwen was also a little curious about what Parker wanted to say. "Tell me, what is it?" Parker leaned on the railing in a frustrated manner. After hearing Gwen's question, he stood up and looked at her and finally shook his head. "Okay, that's it." Gwen turned away a little disappointed. Parker shot her spider silk to stick to her waist and then pulled her back. Gwen opened her eyes wide and looked at the spider silk on her waist. The sudden stimulation made Gwen a little breathless. She took 2 breaths and looked at Parker. "Is it you?" Parker didn't answer, but kissed her directly. Gwen still couldn't get out of the shock brought by Parker's identity. "You are Spider-Man. Don't talk." Parker hugged her and continued to kiss passionately. At this time, Helen Stacy came over. Gwen. Then she saw the intimate scene between her daughter and Parker. "Ah. Your dad wants you to come in right away." "Okay." She turned her head away a little embarrassed. Parker and Gwen separated immediately. Parker turned his head away from her embarrassedly. Gwen looked at her mother awkwardly. "Okay." Seeing that Gwen was still standing there, Helen could only say again, "Gwen." Gwen had no choice but to nod and reply, "I'll be there." Then she walked into the house. Parker turned his head to look at her. Gwen was still immersed in the joy that Parker was Spider-Man. Parker wanted to follow her into the house, but at this time, his spider sense suddenly made him aware of something unusual. The sound of a police car sounded outside the building. Parker turned his head to look over there and stopped on the balcony. Gwen walked into the house, turned around and found that Parker had not followed. She looked at him a little puzzled. Parker walked to the balcony and looked downstairs. George Stacy walked out of the door quickly and got into the police car. Several cars roared away. Parker saw it clearly on the balcony and then jumped off the balcony without hesitation. Gwen looked at Parker's disappearing back and murmured to herself, "I'm in big trouble." Peter and Gwen, they are just like when we first got together, do you remember? Aunt Mare looked at the two people who were intimate in the sky and recalled the scene between her and Uncle Ben. "Yeah, that's right. I remember it very clearly, ha ha ha." Uncle Ben also laughed. He did this kind of thing at that time. Toby Spider glanced at the first generation Gwen and then the two kissed each other. At this time, they were sitting on the top of a high-rise building from which they could overlook most of the city of New York. The lights of thousands of houses below were bright, so beautiful. Toby Spider also read a poem to the first generation Gwen. Gwen, who was leaning on him, looked up at him in surprise and then hugged him tighter. "Did Dr. Otto teach you this?" Gwen he asked while lying on his chest. "Yeah. Do you like it? I have memorized many of them." Toby Spider touched Gwen's back. Read a few more to me." "Okay." The scene came to the taxi that Connors was sitting in at the time. A big hole had been broken in the back of the car, and the driver was sitting in the driver's seat in shock. The bridge was jammed at this time, and a large number of cars were stranded on the bridge. The drivers kept honking their horns to urge them. Legitrata said impatiently in the back seat, "Can you go and see what happened, Alfred?" After hearing this, Alfred got out of the car and walked to the front to check the situation. Legitrata's car was suddenly hit by the car behind him. He said helplessly, "Oh, very good." He thought it was just the owner of the car behind him who accidentally hit him, and he didn't care. But then another car in the next lane hit his side and pushed him against the edge of the bridge. "Wow. Hey." He turned his head to the other side in annoyance, but suddenly found that many people were running over in a hurry. He looked at the chaotic crowd in the car without knowing why. Legitrata didn't know what happened, but he instinctively wanted to leave the car, but the doors on both sides were blocked. "Help." He shouted for help while trying to kick the car door open with his legs, but he couldn't open the door, no matter how hard he tried. At this time, Parker had come to the top of the bridge on the spider silk, looked at the lizard man below, and took out the spider suit from his backpack. Parker saw what the other party was looking for, and saw that it wanted to overturn a car that was in the way. Parker jumped down in time and pulled it with spider silk and hung it under the bridge. Legitrata was in the car watching the car behind him being blown away, and he was nervous and terrified. At this time, Connors had found his car. Chapter 130. The sharp claws penetrated the roof and reached out to him. Legitrata leaned against the seat in fear. Connors saw that he couldn't catch him from above, so he reached back. Legitrata just breathed a sigh of relief, and the claws broke the glass and grabbed him. He dodged urgently, and the leather seat cover was directly torn, and then the other side. Then the whole car was lifted up by Dr. Lizard and thrown under the bridge. At this time, Parker finally caught up with Connors. He kicked him to the ground with a spider silk, and then stood on the bridge and fired spider silk to hang the car under the bridge. Legitrata's face in the car hit the front windshield heavily, and the glass was cracked. The camera zoomed out, and the bridge was full of vehicles hanging under the bridge. As soon as Parker fixed the spider silk, Connors found that his mutation was gradually fading. Parker wanted to chase Connors, but a man's cry for help came from the other side. "Someone help me. Help me. My child is trapped." On one side was the mysterious lizard man who started to escape, and on the other side was the child who needed rescue. Parker did not hesitate too much, and chose to save people. He jumped onto the back cover of the car, pulled out the rear windshield with one palm, and threw it away. The boy in the car was screaming for his dad. Parker hurriedly comforted the little boy, but because Parker was wearing a mask, the child was instinctively scared and kept shaking the car, so Parker had to take off the hood. "I'm just an ordinary person. Okay." After Parker took off his mask, the child was not so scared, and he threw his mask to the child. "What's your name?" "Jack." Parker was about to ask him what his name was, and then he saw the name on his backpack. "Let's get out of here." Parker got into the car carefully. What he didn't notice was that the car had started to leak oil. Parker helped the little boy unbuckle his seatbelt. Just when Parker wanted to take the boy away, the oil in the vehicle came into contact with the headlights, and the electric sparks directly ignited the gasoline, and a raging flame instantly ignited. The spider silk was directly melted, and Parker immediately shot the spider silk upwards, and then pulled the rear bumper of the car hard to prevent the car from falling into the river. "Jack, climb up quickly." The little boy was afraid to move, and Parker encouraged him. "You can do it. Put on the mask. It will make you stronger. Believe me, Jack. Put it on." The little boy Jack put the mask on his head, and Parker said with satisfaction, "Very good. That's it, buddy. Okay. Climb up now. Come on, Jack." The bumper that Parker was holding had begun to deform slightly, and the little boy began to climb up with effort. Parker knew that the car would not last long. "Hurry up, okay, man. You did a great job, man. You did a great job. That's it. Keep crawling over here. Keep trying." Parker kept encouraging the little boy, hoping to save him in time. At this moment, the bumper broke completely, and the car instantly fell downwards. "No!" Parker yelled, fired a spider silk to catch the little boy, and successfully pulled him out of the car. Parker breathed a sigh of relief. He slowly retracted the spider silk, put the hood back on his head, and then carried the little boy back to his father. Jack's father hugged Jack with a look of relief. "Thank God. Are you okay, my child?" Jack smiled at him. Parker silently squatted behind them and watched this touching scene. The father held the child and looked at Parker on the side and asked, "Who are you?" "Spider-Man." Parker fired a spider silk and left the bridge. Jack's father Troy watched the thrilling scene on the sky with lingering fear. His child almost left him. Jack shouted, "Dad," and then threw himself into his arms. Dr. Carnes's face was very ugly. He didn't expect that he would become like this. He looked at the potion in front of him and immediately chose to destroy it. At the same time, Oscorp Industries was also attacked by public opinion. Board member McCann was forced to hold a meeting to discuss how to deal with this terrible situation. The mayor of New York City personally called Norman Osborn. Although he was about to die, he still had to wipe his ass because he was still the CEO of Oscorp Industries. After the call, Norman Osborn's body, which was about to collapse, became worse. He lay on the bed very weakly and ordered the servant, "Call Harry back. You rescued the child. Great job." Gwen pinched the rubber ball carefully while saying, "Toss aid Parker." "Thank you." Parker looked up at her, then lowered his head to look at Gwen's hand and covered it with his palm. Then Gwen got excited and the rubber ball in her hand exploded again. Ouch. This time Parker failed to dodge and ended up like George. "Oh, sorry. Ha ha ha." Gwen apologized first and then couldn't help laughing at the messy Parker. Parker looked at his dirty clothes helplessly. Parker, who returned home, looked at the mask on the ground. It was not until this time that he realized the responsibility on his shoulders and understood what Uncle Ben said to him that night. Unfortunately, he didn't listen to it at that time. In the sewer, Carnes turned back to human form. He gasped heavily, and his right arm disappeared again. Carnes found a piece of rag and wrapped his body with it. He looked at a small lizard on the pipe and thought that this creature was perfect and beautiful. The next morning, the police station was surrounded by a crowd, and they wanted the police station to explain what happened last night. As the police chief, George stood up without hesitation, and he stretched out his hand to signal everyone to be quiet. "Listen, there was an accident at about 9 o'clock last night on the Williamsburg Bridge. What happened is still just speculation." At Uncle Ben's house, Aunt May was holding a glass of milk and watching the TV, which was playing George's speech, and Parker was sitting next to him eating breakfast. However, several witnesses to this case and our preliminary findings have confirmed that someone appeared at the scene. So, this morning, I will issue an arrest warrant to arrest the vigilante named Spider-Man. Hearing George's words, the media reporters at the scene began to talk about it, and Parker didn't want to continue eating breakfast anymore and walked out of the house with his backpack. Aunt May looked at Parker's back without knowing why. She didn't know what happened to Parker, who suddenly left after having a good breakfast. Chapter 131. What's wrong with him? Wanted Spider-Man? He was there saving people. It was another big lizard that hurt people. Can't he see it? Spider-Man even saved the guy who should go to hell. Damn it, he didn't know what that ratter was going to do. Isn't this George Gwen's father? How did Gwen have such a father? He can't tell right from wrong. Due to George's speech in the sky, many citizens were extremely dissatisfied with him. There were so many people watching at the scene. Spider-Man saved those people in the car, but he turned a blind eye. George couldn't help covering his face while looking at the sky. He could already see people gathering downstairs because Gwen in the sky revealed the location of their home to Parker, so the citizens could easily find it here. Although they couldn't get in, it didn't affect them from scolding him. Parker and Gwen in the room heard the shouting below. They stuck their heads out and found that there were many people surrounding the door below. Oh, they must be looking for Daddy, Peter. Gwen immediately realized that these citizens must have come because they were dissatisfied with her father's attitude towards Spider-Man in the sky. So she looked at Parker for help. Parker also knew that only he, Spider-Man, could solve this kind of thing. If it was not done well, the prestige of the New York Police Department would be greatly hit. He asked Gwen to stay in the room and continue to adapt to her strength. He came outside and looked at George and prepared to go downstairs. Hey, Peter, wait, you can't go out like this. George stopped Parker, then took out a piece of clothing from his closet and threw it to him. Parker then realized that he was very dirty. After changing clothes, Parker went downstairs with George. Gwen didn't want to stay in the room, so she ran to the balcony and looked down with Helen and the others. Parker took a lot of effort to persuade these people to leave here, and his mouth was almost dry. Oh, this is really troublesome. We need to come up with a solution quickly, Parker said to George with his shoulders slumped. He was so tired. This was the second time. Yeah, George felt the same way. The most important thing was that he was always the one who talked nonsense in the sky, which made him unlucky in reality. Thanks to Parker's intervention, otherwise he would have to resign tomorrow. On campus, Gwen and Parker sat together on the playground, watching the football team play. Parker handed the specimen of the spider that bit him to Gwen. Gwen looked at the little spider in the glass bottle and couldn't help but sigh. It's so beautiful, but it bites people very well. Parker complained. He still remembered how long he felt uncomfortable when he was bitten, and he was tortured by spider sense for a while afterwards. Who else knows about this? Gwen asked curiously. Only you. Parker smiled lightly. Really? Gwen was a little surprised. This was a secret between the two of them, which was enough to show her importance in Parker's heart. Hey, you don't believe the police's statement, right? Parker looked at Gwen a little nervously. She shook her head. Of course not. Does this scare you? Your superpowers? Although Parker did have this concern in his heart, afraid that he would be caught for experiments, he still smiled and said to Gwen, no. Gwen looked at Parker's expression and knew that he was not thinking what he said, but did not show it. Instead, she changed the subject and asked, what does that thing on the bridge look like? It's huge. It doesn't look like a human. This was the first time Parker encountered a monster like Dr. Lizard. Gwen reminded, you have to keep a low profile. I can't do that. Parker knew what Gwen meant. The police station had issued a warrant for his arrest, but he was determined. You have to do that. Gwen tried to get Parker not to do such a dangerous thing, but Parker still shook his head. She asked in confusion, why? Because last night, those people on the bridge, the thing that attacked them might kill them. So, I have to catch it. Parker pursed his lips, his eyes revealing a hint of determination. He thought a lot last night, thinking of the last words Uncle Ben told him before he died. Uncle Ben and Richard Parker both believe that if you can do good things for others, you have a moral responsibility to do those things. Parker can't just sit back and watch Connors. He has to stop it. This is his responsibility and what Uncle Ben expects. He can't live up to this expectation. Gwen shook her head gently. This is not your duty. Maybe? Parker looked deeply at Gwen's beautiful face and suddenly said, I like kissing you very much. Your kissing skills are great. Hearing Parker's words, Gwen turned her head away a little shyly, not daring to look at him. "You know, this kiss is great for me too." Gwen looked up at him. "Really?" Parker slowly approached Gwen, and just as the two were about to kiss, a football flew towards them, and Parker caught it with one hand without looking back. Then he threw it back hard. Gwen turned her head and saw that the football that was thrown directly hit the football goalpost on the playground and made a dent. Parker came back to his senses and looked over there after hearing the sound. "Wow. Who did this?" The players of the rugby team looked at the goalpost that was knocked crooked in disbelief, and Parker and Gwen looked at each other in bewilderment. Helen looked at Parker in the sky and became more and more satisfied. He was capable and responsible. Her 3 sons also looked at Parker across the table with admiration. Gwen was beside him, carefully holding the iron spoon with 2 fingers and eating food. After dinner, everyone watched TV together. At this time, the news broadcast showed Osborne Industries' solution for the lizard potion. They announced that they would destroy all the lizard potions that had been produced so far. Dr. Connors continued study the equation until the regeneration potion is perfected, and then conduct the experiment again to ensure that the disaster in the sky will not happen. The mayor of New York City also held a press conference at night, representing the New York City government, to express that people will be sent to Osborne Industries to supervise and investigate the truth of the death of Richard Parker and his wife. He promised to give Spider-Man Peter Parker justice and not let his parents die in vain. At the same time, he also promised to give Spider-Man the greatest convenience to ensure that the misunderstanding in the sky will not happen. Seeing this, Parker was also a little excited. He finally had the hope of knowing the cause of his parents' death. Chapter 132. In Osmos Industries, Parker came to Dr. Connors' office, but found it empty. Parker shouted, "Is anyone there?" Looking at the messy table, Parker accidentally found a medicine syringe. He picked it up and found that it was empty. This was the one that Connors forgot to put away after using it last night. Just as Parker was concentrating on checking the syringe, Connors' voice rang out, startling him. "It's not good to peek." Parker couldn't help but smile when he saw Connors. Connors explained to Parker, "I'll give everyone a week off." Parker suddenly realized that it was no wonder that no one was there. "Shouldn't you be in school?" Connors didn't know why Parker suddenly came to his office and was a little worried that he would find out about his mutation. "No, I don't have class now. I want to ask you a question. How does a predator track a reptile?" Parker explained, and then told the purpose of his coming here today. "Oh, they don't need it. Most reptiles are at the top of their food chain, and they are the kings in their own field," Connors said while packing his things with his back to Parker. "They must have weaknesses, right? Why are you suddenly interested in cold-blooded animals?" Connors suddenly turned his head and stared at Parker. Parker couldn't tell Connors that he wanted to know how to hunt the lizard last night, so he could only tell him that it was a school assignment and he had to do a biological profile. "So, will these cold-blooded animals react to sudden temperature changes? Then you have to catch one first. It is said that a new species appeared in New York. Have you heard about it? Very beautiful and huge," Connors said, looking at the medicine syringe in his hand. Seeing him mention the lizard monster last night, Parker couldn't help but stand up and asked, "How did you know? Have you seen it?" "No, but it's not a secret, but he may be very fierce if it is threatened." Connors looked at Parker with a serious expression. Parker noticed the strange marks on his neck, which were the sequelae left by the lizard potion. "Doctor, are you okay?" Parker asked a little worriedly. "It's never been so good, Peter. Never. Now, if you don't mind, I have to ask you to leave. I'm working on a new project and I don't want to be disturbed by others." Connors opened the door and asked Parker to leave. Parker nodded and looked at the messy office before leaving. "Don't worry, Mr. Parker. I'll be back soon, and wonderful things are coming." "Wonderful things." Connors opened the door and left, and Parker looked at his back thoughtfully. Just then, a strange action attracted his attention. He turned his head and walked over there. He saw a hole in the glass cover with some blood stains on it. Parker continued to look forward and saw that the mutated Freddy was biting a little white mouse. Parker looked at this scene in disbelief. "Freddy? He immediately realized the symptoms of Dr. Connors. Parker wanted to chase him, but Connors had disappeared. Oh, shit. Seeing the tragic scene, a mother quickly covered her child's eyes, subconsciously thinking that this would prevent him from seeing the sky. Many citizens felt a little disgusted. This bloody scene was too exciting. Many children were afraid that they would not be able to sleep tonight. Connors looked at Freddy with a serious expression and reluctantly destroyed it and the lizard potions together. I think I have to go see Dr. Connors. At this time, Parker was sitting with George, and Uncle Ben was also there. Opposite them was the mayor of New York. The mayor of New York decided to let George's police station hire Peter Parker, so that he would no longer be a volunteer policeman, but a real policeman with privileges. He could have law enforcement power at any time, as long as he thought it was necessary. At the same time, considering the personal safety of Uncle Ben and Aunt May, the mayor of New York also gave them a villa, so that Uncle Ben would not have to look for a house again. The villa was once owned by a fallen rich man. After bankruptcy, it should have been auctioned and mortgaged, but in order to please Spider-Man's fans in America, the mayor of New York reluctantly bought it at a low price and gave it away. After all, fan sieges have happened many times. Not only the police station, but also the city government has been blocked. But Parker didn't watch the news recently and didn't know. This villa is very high-end. Even George Stacy, the police chief, can only stay away. It has very complete security measures and is surrounded by wealthy areas. Parker and Uncle Ben didn't want to accept the gift for nothing, but the mayor insisted that this was a good way to calm his fans. George knew what the mayor was worried about. The mayor talked to George on the phone for more than an hour last night, just for today's matter. He persuaded Parker, and frankly said that, if Parker didn't want to accept the gift for nothing, he could pay it back when he had money in the future. As for where the money came from, Parker didn't need to worry about it. George said that Parker was very rich, but he just hadn't got it yet. After persuasion, they agreed, mainly because Parker agreed he didn't want Uncle Ben and Aunt May to be implicated by him. Originally, Uncle Ben had found a new house. Although it was a bit remote, it was better because there were fewer people around. But now that he had the villa, he naturally didn't need the house. At the same time, a luxury car stopped in front of Norman Osborn's house. Harry was sitting inside. He looked at the sky and muttered to himself, "Peter, I'm back." The scene changed. George Stacy was talking to the mayor on the phone. "Mr. Mayor, if there is a dinosaur running around, you will be the first to know. So tell your son that he doesn't have to worry, okay?" "Yes. You are the same as me, sir." After George hung up the phone, he looked at Parker. "Mr. Parker, why aren't you in school?" "No class today." Parker explained again. "Okay. I don't have much time. You should finish your words quickly." George walked out of the office and Parker followed him. "No problem. It may not be a dinosaur running around Manhattan. It's something more dangerous. I know who it is." Parker quickly explained why he came to George. "Do you know who it is?" Hearing this, George turned his head and looked at Parker in surprise. "Drive Kurt Connors. He's a biologist. The one from Osborn? Dr. Connors. My daughter's mentor. Are you talking about him?" George asked again. "Yes." Parker was very sure. Recently, Dr. Connors wrote a college recommendation letter for Gwen. It was very beautiful. I cried when I read it. And now you want me to believe that he cost us a dinosaur and ran around. It's not Cos. It's not a dinosaur. He transformed himself into a giant lizard. Parker knew that it might be impossible for George to believe this. When he thought of his beloved doctor turning into a monster, Parker couldn't help but cover his face. After listening, George closed his eyes, took a deep breath and asked, "Let me ask you a question first. Do I look like the mayor of Tokyo?" George felt that Parker was joking with him. If he didn't know, he would have thought this was Tokyo and Connors was Godzilla. Chapter 133. I'll tell you the absolute truth again. This man has spent his life studying cross-species gene transplantation. He lost an arm, and he wants it to grow back, but the equation is not balanced. This caused him to become a lizard man, and he's using lizard DNA. He's very dangerous, and he's planning something terrible now. I know it. I know it. Parker tried to convince George, but George thought Parker might have gone stupid from reading and was talking in his sleep, so he perfunctorily said, "This is our plan. You go back and travel with the citizens of Tokyo, and I'll go back to protect the citizens of our beautiful city." Then he ordered a police officer to send Parker back to school. Parker folded his hands and begged, "Chief Stacy, I'm not here to make trouble. Take him to the police station. You have to call him. You have to call him over. He's a threat to everyone." Parker was carried farther and farther away by Officer Butler, and his voice became louder and louder. "Please, believe me." Butler pushed him out of the police station impatiently. George looked at Parker thoughtfully. After he was pushed out, he walked aside and pinched his eyebrows and said, "Jimmy, give me all the information about Dr. Kurt Connors. Okay, hurry up." Poor Peter Parker. His words are really hard to believe, especially Connors also wrote a letter of recommendation to Gwen. Tony put down the tools in his hand and snapped his fingers. The little robot came over with 2 glasses of wine. Tony handed one of the glasses to Banner. "Indeed, if someone told me before that gamma rays would make people mutate, I wouldn't believe it," Banner said after taking a sip. "Yeah. Who said it wasn't? George has lived for so long and has seen so many storms, but he has never seen a person mutate into a lizard. It's normal not to believe it, but at least he listened to Peter Parker's words and went to check Connors' information." Connors sat in the office a little depressed. Parker walked in from the door. He was unimpeded all the way and everyone recognized him. "Doctor, are you okay?" After Parker came out of the mayor's office, he went directly to Osborne Industries. Looking at Connors' unshaven appearance, he asked worriedly. He handed the house matter to Uncle Ben. Anyway, with George Stacy, the police chief, Parker thought George would not cheat him. "Peter, you are here. Sit down." Connors pulled out a chair for Parker to sit down. I don't know what to say. My hard work failed. They temporarily stopped my research until they were sure that there would be no risks. After restarting the research, although he claimed that he would continue his research, the board of directors actually banned his work directly because government investigators were preparing and they didn't want any problems at this juncture. I suddenly became idle. Peter. Connors sighed. Just like Otto at the beginning, he encountered great public pressure, even more serious than Otto. I believe you, Doctor. Cheer up. Didn't the simulation succeed? You just need to find a balance. Make sure the lizard genes don't affect human genes. I believe you can succeed. Parker encouraged him. Yeah, I know. I just couldn't accept the blow for a while. I almost caused a disaster. Peter. Connors lost confidence a little, and his efforts over the years turned into this result. It was Legitrator who almost caused a disaster. Not you. You just wanted to stop him. It's not your fault. If he wasn't too eager for success, things wouldn't have come to this point. Parker didn't want Connors to be decadent like this, and in addition to criticizing him for being too reckless, many people also thought that Connors just wanted to stop Legitrator, and his heart was not bad. What's more, he refused Legitrator's unreasonable request for human experiments under his coercion and inducement. He did that just because he was affected by the lizard potion. Hearing Parker's comfort and encouragement, Connors finally cheered up a little and decided to restudy the 00 decay rate algorithm before restarting the experiment to calculate the gene ratio to balance. This may take a long time, but he doesn't care. He has waited for so many years. Parker left the police station and walked on the street. Suddenly, his spider sense made him see a lizard lying on the railing. Parker looked at them as if they were attracted by something and entered the sewer one after another. There was also a bundle of newspapers on the ground, on which was a sharp claw, and the title read, "Reward for those who have evidence." Apparently, the police department is collecting relevant clues about Connors. In the sewer, Connors' voice sounded, "Experimental subject. Dr. Kurt Connors. The current temperature is 89.7 degrees Fahrenheit. The situation is stable for 48 hours. Blood tests show that the lymphocyte and monocyte readings are consistent with the experimental subject's past." It turned out that Connors was recording the data after using the lizard potion. At this time, Parker came down from a wellhead hanging on the spider silk. The coagulation rate has greatly increased. Muscle reaction, strength and flexibility have been significantly improved. Connors kept talking about the experimental data he obtained to the camera. Parker fired spider silk at a sewer outlet that was connected in all directions, leading to all the surrounding sewer outlets, and then pulled these spider silks together to form a huge spider web. On the other side, Connors took off his glasses. The vision has also improved, and the experimental subject no longer needs to wear corrective glasses. This is no longer a cure for the disease. This is an exploration of perfection. Parker has finished setting up the spider web, and Connors has picked up another lizard potion. In order to try to correct the recurrence, the dose has been increased to 200 milligrams. Then he inserted the syringe into his broken arm and injected all the potions into his body. As the potions were injected, Connors' eyes became fierce, and he knocked over the camera in front of him. Parker was lying on the spider web playing games on his mobile phone. Suddenly, there was a movement from a spider silk. Parker immediately noticed that something was crawling on the spider silk. He slowly got up, looked in the direction of the movement, slowly grasped the spider silk, pulled down his mask, and looked at that side with full concentration. Just when Parker wanted to crawl along this spider silk, suddenly another spider thread trembled, and then another, and more spider threads trembled. Parker didn't know where the other party was for a while, but saw a huge black shadow appear at the exit of a sewer, and Parker stared at the black shadow closely. The next second, a small lizard crawled out. Before Parker could breathe a sigh of relief, he found that more lizards were crawling towards him. The spider web he had laid was full of lizards. Just when Parker was a little at a loss, he found that these lizards gathered in the center and moved in one direction. So he followed these lizards and slowly crawled over. Chapter 134. Connors. He is still doing experiments and using himself as an experimental subject, but unfortunately he had problems from the beginning. Banner looked at Connors and felt a little sorry for him. It was obvious that the lizard potion had problems. It could only last for a period of time. When the potion effect ended, his right arm was gone again. He went further and further on this wrong path, but he couldn't turn back. Just when everyone was still thinking about Connors, Egghead received an analysis report on Peter Parker in their universe. Although he had searched for it in the first generation, he didn't carefully compare his parents and family members. It wasn't until the Amazing Spider-Man was also called Peter Parker that he paid attention to it. The youngest one was less than 10 years old, and the oldest one was already in his 30s. These were roughly in line with some of the relevant conditions of Peter Parker in the sky. The one whose parents died, whose uncle was called Ben, and whose aunt was called May, was the most suitable one for the little boy, but his uncle died 2 years ago, which did not match the experience of Peter Parker in the sky. Peter Parker gained superpowers, and then his uncle died to teach Peter Parker to grow into Spider-Man. Egghead thought that once was a coincidence, but twice was not a coincidence. They also found Jameson. There was also the Daily Bugle in their world, and the boss looked very similar, but it was just a similarity. There was no Brent, and no Robbie in his Daily Bugle. After high definition comparison, they found that this was not the same person, but the appearance of the Daily Bugle made them think that there must be a Peter Parker in their universe, but they have not discovered it yet. Parker slowly crawled on the spider silk. When he left the narrow pipe and came to another confluence leading to all directions, a tail hung down from the ceiling behind him, and Parker noticed that someone was behind him. When he turned his head and looked up, Connors pounced on him from above his head. The camera stuck in the sewer by the spider silk began to take pictures. The flash lighted up, illuminating Connors' hideous face. Connors pressed Parker with his weight. Although Parker tried his best to resist, he was still strangled by him. At the same time, due to the weight of the two, some of the walls attached to the spider silk began to break and fall off. You stopped me once. You can't stop me again. I'm getting stronger every day. Connors roared at Parker under him. Parker used one hand to resist his right claw, but he didn't expect Connors' claws to grow. The elongated claws left 3 blood marks on Parker's chest. Feeling the pain, Parker began to exert force, pushing away Kana's claws that stretched towards his head, and then took the opportunity to punch him. Because of the excess of force, the wall attached to the spider silk collapsed, and the two fell into the water together. Parker couldn't fight Kana's in the water, and kicked him away and quickly started to run away. He wanted to launch spider silk, but found that the launcher couldn't work underwater. He had no choice but to swim quickly, slap the railing that blocked his way, and got through. Kana's was unable to enter the narrow pipe due to his huge body after mutation, and could only stand there helplessly and furious. Parker got out of this narrow passage, and was immediately carried away by the fast current. Parker tried to hold onto the wall, but the water was too slippery, and he couldn't hold on at all, and was washed out of the sewer. Climbing onto the steps on the side, Parker couldn't help but sigh, "Oh, this is too bad." On the other side, Kana's climbed back to the place where he had just fought with Parker, pulled the spider silk stuck on his body, but accidentally touched the camera, and the flash attracted his attention. It pulled the camera off the wall, and found that it was written on its Peter Parker, personal property. Kana's looked at the signature on it, Peter Parker. It was angry, and crushed the camera into pieces. "Oh, it's really bad." Tony frowned and watched Parker trying to launch spider silk, but the spider silk launcher didn't work. "Jarvis, help me add a note to Spider-Man's file. The spider silk launcher must be able to launch in water. There are also underwater breathing apparatus and heaters." Tony said casually. "Okay, sir." What do you mean?" Banner looked at Tony strangely, not knowing what he was going to do. "Here's what I think. You see, Spider-Man exists in many universes. What if our universe also has one? I will prepare a set of armor and a set of armor to restrain him in advance, so that it will be good for both friends and enemies." Banner looked at Tony inexplicably, and couldn't help asking, "Is there one for me too?" Tony laughed awkwardly, and didn't say anything after hearing this. Okay. Banner was not very good either. There is no need to say more. After all, he knows the destructive power of the Hulk better than anyone else. It would be great if someone can deal with the Hulk. Toby Spider looked a little solemn. He recalled the battle between Garfield Spider and Kana's just now. It was obvious that Kana's strength was above Garfield Spider, so he couldn't break free from its restraints. It seems that Cheyenne was right. Garfield Spider's physical fitness was weaker than his, and he was attacked by surprise. It was normal for him to fall behind. However, he had never noticed that he couldn't launch spider silk underwater. He felt that he needed to try whether he could launch it underwater. Gwen was concentrating on the computer in the room. Parker dragged his scarred body to her window. Seeing that she didn't notice him, he knocked his head against the glass. Gwen turned around after hearing the noise and found Parker outside her window. She didn't realize Parker was injured at first, so she waved her head and gestured, "Come in. Maybe you should consider coming in openly. Besides, my dad thinks it's time for you to see a psychiatrist," Gwen said to Parker with a smile. "Oh, really?" Parker stumbled into the room while laughing. Gwen realized that something was wrong with Parker. "Peter?" She quickly got up and came to Parker, asking worriedly, "What happened?" She helped Parker lie down on the chair. Parker laughed weakly. "You should see the other guy. That guy. He suddenly changed from a human to a giant lizard." Just as Parker was talking to Gwen, George came over and asked, "Hey, Gwen, sweetheart. Do you want a cup of cocoa? Howard is making cocoa." Hearing her father's voice, Gwen immediately nervously asked Parker to shush her. Parker immediately got up and hid behind the chair. Gwen opened the door and said to George, "No, Daddy, I don't want to drink cocoa. Besides, I'm 17 years old." "Okay, but I remember someone said last week that her dream is to live in a chocolate house." George teased Gwen. "That's unrealistic." Bang. Gwen closed the door, then opened it again and said to George, "And you will get fat." George thought Gwen was a little weird. Chapter 135. After closing the door, Gwen turned around and looked at Parker, who was hiding behind her chair, and poked his head out and said with a smile, "Chocolate house." Gwen rolled her eyes when she heard it. Then she opened the door again. "Sorry, Daddy. It's okay." George waved his hand. "I can't drink cocoa because I'm busy with something now." "I'm busy. I have menstrual cramps. I feel very uncomfortable now, and a little emotionally unstable, like crying. Gwen was quick-witted and pretended that she had menstrual cramps. George really didn't suspect anything and said, "Okay, I know. It hurts a lot. You don't want to know. Believe me, it's terrible." She waved her hand and said, "I understand." George nodded repeatedly. "Thank you, Daddy." Gwen smiled and immediately closed the door. "Gwen, when did you learn to lie to your father? Aren't you afraid of getting fat?" George looked at Gwen, who was drinking cocoa. Gwen smiled awkwardly and put down the cup in her hand silently. Helen looked at the father and daughter with a smile. Howard pulled her clothes and asked curiously, "Why does drinking cocoa make you fat?" He liked drinking cocoa the most. "When will Parker come?" The youngest son looked at Gwen and asked, "Because Parker had to help Uncle Ben move, and he hadn't come until now." Gwen replied, "He told me later." "Will you dirty his clothes?" Faced with this death question, Gwen was speechless for a while, and was so embarrassed that she scratched her shoes. "Gwen?" George looked at Gwen, who was sitting opposite with a tearful expression on her face. Parker took off his shirt, revealing his strong and solid muscles. Gwen was holding a towel in his hand, and was wiping Parker's wound. Parker felt a little pain and his body trembled. He looked at Gwen, who was treating his wound seriously, and couldn't help but straighten up and wanted to kiss Gwen. "Don't get excited, bug boy." Parker couldn't help but laugh. "What did you call me?" The two leaned their foreheads against each other. Parker reached out and stroked Gwen's cheek, comforting her. "I'll be fine." "No, something's wrong." "It's okay. It's okay." Parker kissed her face and comforted her. "I know what's going on." Hearing this, Parker didn't quite understand what she meant. "What?" "Every day since I can remember, my father goes out every morning. He wears the badge on his chest and ties the gun to his waist. Then every day, since I can remember, I've been worried that he will never come back." Looking at Gwen's worried eyes, Parker pursed his lips and stroked Gwen's face with both hands. "I understand." "Okay." Parker knew what Gwen was thinking, but he had to stop Connors. "But I have to stop him. I have to do this. Because I created it," Parker said while hugging Gwen. Gwen didn't understand why Parker said that. "What do you mean?" "I gave him the equation. I caused this situation. My father used to study something, you know, secretly. Now I understand why he kept it secret. The key is, this is my responsibility. I must make up for this mistake." "Peter." Gwen rubbed her face against Parker's palm and didn't dissuade him anymore. "Hey, let's go out and get some fresh air. Just go get some fresh air. Just for a while, okay?" Parker said with a smile. "No, no way. Come on. It's okay. Really no way. If my parents see me leaving, I'll be dead." Gwen was afraid of being discovered by her parents. Parker smiled slightly. "They won't see you leave." Then Parker was seen in the night sky holding Gwen and wandering between high-rise buildings on spider silk. In the sewer, Connors muttered silently, "Peter Parker." A second voice seemed to ring in the air. "Spider-Man. I'm not the only one who needs help. No more loneliness. No more isolation. Wide distribution of species can promote human evolution. Survival of the fittest." While listening to the voice in his heart, Connors began to make lizard potion again. At this time, the traces of lizard skin on his face were extremely obvious, and it was obvious that the genetic invasion had become deeper and deeper. He murmured to himself, "Therefore, if I can transform like a snake, maybe I can get rid of the imprisonment of my flesh." After you know your own abilities, are you willing to give up the power you feel? "I can save them." Connors slowly walked to the instrument, picked up a lizard potion, and injected it into his body without hesitation. After a painful experience, he felt a powerful force again. "You can't stop my plan, Peter Parker." Connors turned his head. His eyes had become vertical pupils. Lizard skin quickly covered his body, and his tail quickly grew out. George was expressionless and didn't speak. Gwen lowered her head and didn't dare to look at George. She cursed Parker more than 800 times in her heart. This was really terrible. Then she saw the rotten slippers and felt even worse. "Oh, gift crab." The first generation of Dr. Connors frowned and looked at the completely blackened self in the sky and covered his forehead. This wave of reputation was damaged. Many people saw the second generation of Connors blackened and asked the government to investigate him, which also caused him a lot of trouble. The first generation of Norman Osborn looked at Connors as if he saw himself at the beginning. He was also bewitched by the evil personality in this way, and finally caused a disaster. Fortunately, Parker stopped himself in time. What does he want to do? Go to Peter? Uncle Ben put down the furniture and looked at the sky. He couldn't help shaking his head. It seems that Peter Parker's extraordinary road is not so easy to walk. I think it's likely. Parker squeezed in from the door with 2 large bags of things. Fortunately, the gate of the villa is wide enough, otherwise he can't get in. You'd better be careful, and don't be careless. Uncle Ben warned him earnestly. Parker nodded. He was thinking about how to tell them that Gwen also had superpowers. The second generation Connors himself sighed. The crazier the self in the sky, the greater the pressure he faced. If Parker hadn't clarified the facts for him as soon as he became a special police officer, he probably wouldn't even dare to leave the house now. It is also worth mentioning that Legitrator seemed to know that he would never get out anyway, so he refused to reveal the truth about the death of Richard Parker and his wife. Due to the importance of this case, George had to hand him over to the FBI to avoid leaving this hot potato in the New York Police Department. He couldn't tell Parker that they didn't ask anything. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136. Midtown Science High School. The school is full of students preparing for class. In a toilet, the toilet lid is shaking constantly, and the next second the whole toilet collapses. A huge claw stretched out from the pit, and then Connors came out. Parker and many students heard the noise and turned their heads to look over there. Seeing a terrible monster rushing out of the toilet, the students were scared and began to run for their lives. Geo! 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 Parker shouted at Gwen, and Gwen looked back at Parker while walking. Among the many students who ran away, only Peter Parker went upstream. Connors stared at Peter Parker, and the two rushed towards each other at the same time. Connors stretched out his claws to grab Parker, and Parker slid and fired spider silk to trip its feet. Connors immediately lost his balance and fell heavily to the ground. Parker took the opportunity to rush up and stepped on his back, then swung his fist at it, but Connors predicted Parker's action, grabbed his arm, and pulled him down. Parker quickly got up. Connors wanted to catch him, but only grabbed his backpack. Parker wanted to distance himself, but was still caught by Connors. It lifted Parker's collar and slammed him heavily against the locker, then threw him out. Parker broke through the wooden window and fell into a classroom. Parker slid on the ground for a distance before stopping. Connors broke through the wall and rushed in. He was stepped on the arm just as he was about to get up. Connors swung his claws. Parker quickly blocked them with his feet, then picked up a chair and smashed it, but it didn't hurt him. Nowhere to hide, Peter. It slapped the ground with its slap, and its claws scratched several deep scratches on the ground. Parker held its legs tightly and suddenly saw the backpack in the corridor. He immediately fired spider silk to pull the backpack over. As soon as he jumped up to catch the backpack, Connors grabbed it and threw it against the wall. Parker broke through the wall again and fell in. It was pitch black inside. Connors couldn't see the situation inside. He saw chemicals on the table, took them and mixed them, and then threw the chemicals that were acting violently into the wall. It exploded the moment it landed. Connors said to Parker inside, "Those displaced souls. I can save them. I can heal them. There is no need to stop me, Peter." A shoe was thrown out of the wall and hit Connors in the face. It roared angrily, and Parker jumped out. At this time, he had changed into a spider suit. Parker shot out spider silk to stick to the lights on the ceiling, and then pulled them over and hit Connors. Connors staggered, and when he looked up again, Parker's figure had disappeared in front of him. It looked around and began to search, but Parker hid on the ceiling behind it and then suddenly jumped on its back. "Your idea is wrong, Doctor." He shot out spider silk to entangle its head and hands. Connors kept twisting his body to try to catch Parker, but Parker was extremely flexible and could not catch him. Stop. This is not you. Parker still wanted to persuade Connors until this time, but Connors was completely controlled by the lizard personality. It saw that it couldn't catch Parker, so it slammed into the wall hard. Parker was caught off guard and hit the locker. Connors swung his claws and attacked, but Parker flexibly dodged to the ceiling. Let's talk, Doctor. Connors ignored Parker's words and climbed up the ceiling to chase him. Parker dodged Connors' attack again and then continuously fired spider silk to try to trap its claws on the wall, but unfortunately the attachment point was the locker and Connors pulled the locker door out with a little force. This time, not only did it fail to trap it, but it also gave Connors an extra weapon in his hand. Parker also realized that the situation was not good and subconsciously said, "Oh, God." Connors waved the weapon in his hand, and Parker kept dodging with backflips. When its feet were wide open, Parker fired spider silk in the opposite direction and drilled through the crotch and came to the other side. Okay, don't you want to talk? Here you go. Connors looked at Parker, who was as flexible as a monkey, and roared angrily. As a result, Parker directly covered his mouth with spider silk. Connors pulled the spider silk off his mouth and became even more angry. He turned around and used his tail to sweep across and then hit Parker hard. Parker caught his tail with both hands. Don't force me to hurt you. He just wanted to throw it up, but Connor's tail was repeatedly thrown against the wall, and even his words were intermittent. Finally, he was thrown to the corridor on the other side. Parker tore off Connor's tail, held the tail, and knocked open the door of the corridor. Fell to the ground, and Connors walked towards Parker, with his tail growing out as he walked. Parker threw away his tail with disgust and said, "How disgusting." Then he did a backflip and stood up, fired spider silk to stick to Connors, and then used the elasticity of the spider silk to kick his feet on his chest. Connors never thought that he would take this hard, but took the opportunity to grab Parker's head and slam him against the glass. Connors tried hard to crush Parker's head. At this moment, Gwen suddenly appeared and smashed Connors' head with a metal ornament. Connors immediately put down Parker and looked at her. Gwen. Although Gwen was terrified, she still did not run away. She wanted to fight alongside Parker. Connors wanted to swing his claws at her, but Parker immediately shot spider silk to pull his hand back. Then Parker began to circle around Connors, shooting a large number of spider webs to wrap him up. Parker slapped Connors around like a spider. He wrapped his hands and tail tightly with spider silk, and then shot spider silk in all directions to stick to his body. A large amount of spider silk locked Connors firmly in place and made him unable to move. Then Parker shot spider silk to pull the ornaments in Gwen's hand and her together, and then took the things in her hand and threw them out of the window. The window glass was smashed to pieces immediately. Parker hugged Gwen and said to her, "I'm going to throw you out of the window now." What? Before Gwen could react, Parker threw her out and then shot out spider silk to stick her and hang her in the corridor. At this time, Connors finally got rid of the spider silk. He tore all the spider silk on his body. At this time, the siren sounded outside the window. Connors turned his head and looked at Parker in front of him. "Oh, someone is a bad lizard." Parker half crouched and teased Connors. Chapter 137. Wow. He's so amazing. He can do this. He's like a real spider. This action. This skill. It's extraordinary. Toby Spider looked at Garfield Spider's action with admiration. Compared with his powerful flying bricks, Garfield Spider's action is perfect, both in flexibility and viewing. Can you do it? The first generation Gwen looked at Toby Spider curiously. Yeah. Yes, I can. No problem, believe me. Toby Spider said, after hesitating for a while, and secretly thought in his heart that he must practice well this time, and he must not embarrass himself. Okay. The first generation Gwen smiled slightly, and began to look forward to Toby Spider's performance. But do you remember what the narrator said at the beginning? When Toby Spider saw Garfield Spider throwing the second generation Gwen out, and then holding her with spider silk, he suddenly thought of something at the beginning. What? The first generation Gwen didn't quite understand what Toby Spider was talking about. No, nothing. I hope I'm overthinking. Toby Spider shook his head and said nothing more. Seeing this, the first generation Gwen stopped asking. In the library, a familiar old man was wearing headphones and listening to soothing music. Behind him, Parker and Connors broke through the wall and rushed in. Parker picked up a book and smashed it on Connors' head, then jumped up and did a backflip to avoid Connors' attack. Connors picked up a table and threw it at Parker. Parker quickly used spider silk to pull the table back to prevent it from hitting the old man. The old man was wearing headphones and didn't notice the fight at all. He picked up the bread bag and walked straight out of the library. Just as the old man walked out of the door, Parker flew past him from behind, hit the bookshelf, and fell to the ground. Parker was so weak that he lay on the ground and struggled to get up, but found that Connors had disappeared without a trace. He carefully searched for Connors' traces on the campus. Suddenly, he heard a noise in front of him. Parker immediately quickened his pace and ran over. He came to the broken toilet. The ground was full of building debris. Parker carefully looked at the toilet seat where Connors came from. Connors' white coat was still hanging on it. This old man, he really didn't notice it at all. Ha ha ha. Tony laughed so hard. Banner on the side couldn't help laughing. Peter Parker was fighting there and he didn't notice it at all while listening to music. Parker also helped him pull back the chair that hit him. It was so thoughtful. This headset is absolutely useful for isolating sound. Ha ha ha. It's amazing. You can't hear such a big fight. Buy this headset. What brand is it? I want the same one. Parker had just moved and received a call. It showed an unknown call. After he answered the call, a surprising voice came from inside. Outside the campus, many firefighters and police officers are checking the scene. Missy, the beautiful girl with glasses, and others are being checked by the police officers to confirm whether they are in good mental state. Many special police officers are deployed outside the school with live ammunition. Gwen is calling Parker. In the sewer, the phone in Parker's backpack rings, and he takes it out to answer it. Hey, where are you? Gwen asked worriedly. I'm fine. I'm tracking it in the sewer. I want to stop it before it hurts anyone. But we need an antidote. Can you prepare the serum? Parker asked as he spoke. I will. I often help Dr. Connors make serum. Okay, great. I want you to go to Osborne Industries. Read the cross-species file. It's a dose of blue serum. File 12389. Okay, I'll be there right away. Gwen hung up the phone and immediately prepared to go to Osborne building. Parker walked along the sewer and found Connors' experimental base. He looked around and didn't see Connors, so he jumped up. The table was full of used syringes and lizard potions. There was also a video of Connors on the computer, and a small lizard was crawling on it. Parker pressed the space bar and the video began to play. As a scientist, I have spent my entire life creating a world without weaknesses and without rejection. I strive to create stronger humans, but there is no such thing. Humans are weak, pathetic, cowardly creatures. Why do we still want to be humans? We can become faster, stronger and smarter. This is my gift to you. Parker looked at the simulation experiment on the computer on the other side, using the canary device to turn all the people in New York into lizard people like him. OS Industries. He immediately realized that something was wrong, because Gwen was rushing there. Oh, damn, that canary device is a disaster. We should have destroyed it long ago. McKen's bald head became even balder. In order to cope with the pressure of public opinion, he had destroyed the lizard potion before. Now they have to destroy the canary device again to restore the confidence of shareholders and investors in OS Industries, because the stock really can't fall anymore. In a short period of time, OS Industries assets evaporated by more than 2/3. Fortunately, the regeneration potion was successful before, and the stock price rose sharply, otherwise they would all go bankrupt at this moment. Even the employees were panicked. Although Peter Parker withstood some pressure for Connors, he still couldn't stop the internal employees from being afraid of some of the company's research. They were forced to suspend a large number of biological research. What made McCann even more upset was the investigators sent by the city government. Not only was Richard and his wife dead, but there was also the problem of the death of experimenters caused by his secret use of spiders for human experiments not long ago. Although Cheyenne Moo said that only Peter Parker could become Spider-Man, Legitrator and McCann didn't take it seriously. They were lucky enough to succeed. After all, they said almost. As a result, all the experimental subjects died without a doubt. He suppressed the matter and planned to push it to Legitrator. Anyway, he couldn't get out, and more debts would not burden him. But he didn't expect that the New York City government could not bear the pressure from Spider-Man fans, and arranged people to investigate at a very fast speed, so that he hadn't cleaned up his hands yet. Now he had to hide the responsibility of the accident from the investigators, and he might have to sacrifice some staff, otherwise he would have to go in with Legitrator. Harry drove to Parker's new home. As soon as he got off the car, he saw Parker waiting for him at the door. He stretched out his hands and smiled. "Hey, Spider-Man." "Oh, don't call me that, Harry. Long time no see." The two hugged each other, and Parker invited him into the house. "Aunt May, Uncle Ben, Harry is here." Hearing Parker's words, Aunt May came out of the kitchen and hugged him. Ever since seeing the feelings of the first generation Harry towards Toby Spider in the sky, Uncle Ben and the others have been very fond of Parker, their childhood playmate. Aunt May warmly invited him to lunch. Facing Aunt May's kind invitation, Harry couldn't refuse, and he really had a lot to say to Parker. While eating, Harry forked a piece of fish and was about to put it into his mouth, but his hand suddenly trembled, and the fork fell to the ground. Harry's eyes flashed a trace of panic, but he didn't show it. He bent down calmly and picked up the fork. The crisp sound of metal falling attracted the attention of several people. Harry smiled and said, "Sorry, my hand slipped." Parker shrugged and didn't care about this little episode. Chapter 138. New York Police Department. George Stacy walked towards a police helicopter waiting for him. An officer came and shouted, "Sheriff Stacy, we have identified the target location, sir. The lizard is heading to Canal Street Station." "What about Spider-Man?" George had to raise his voice because of the noise of the helicopter. "He's still in that high school. I want to arrest that Spider-Man." George replied and got on the helicopter, followed by two SWAT officers. At this time, Connors looked at the empty street and walked out of the station with a backpack on his body. The next second, a SWAT officer stood up from behind the car and fired a shot at it. The bullet directly hit a small dent in it. Then many SWAT officers stood up and fired at it together. A large number of bullets hit Connors, and he fell to the ground motionless with bruises all over his body. The SWAT officers surrounded him, and a police officer poked Connors with a gun. At this moment, the bullet holes on Connors' body healed one after another. Connors' tightly closed eyes suddenly opened, and he suddenly stood up and covered many SWAT officers with smoke bombs made of lizard potion. In the green smoke, Connors hit a SWAT officer to the street with his tail and stopped only after hitting a car. Then he picked up another SWAT officer and hit him on the ceiling and then threw him out again. The SWAT officers exposed to the smoke inhaled the lizard potion, and mutation features began to appear on their faces. They lay on the ground and struggled in pain. He is really smart. He actually knows how to play dead, but it seems that these fire powers have no effect on him, and the wounds heal very quickly. Tony looked solemnly at the bullet holes that recovered as before in just a few seconds, and he felt a little troubled. He secretly calculated in his heart whether his palm cannon could penetrate its body at the maximum power, and whether he needed to increase the firepower. Oh. George couldn't help but curse himself in his heart. What on earth was he thinking? No matter that lizard that was causing trouble in New York, he went to catch Spider-Man. He could guess that he would probably be scolded again. Fortunately, Parker had explained it before, otherwise the New York Police Department would probably be surrounded by fanatical fans again. Gwen had already arrived in the Osborn building at this time. She walked quickly to the laboratory and opened the door with her ID card. On the street, a manhole cover was suddenly knocked off, and then Parker jumped out of it and did not forget to close the manhole cover when he ran away. At this time, Connors was still fighting with the SWAT. He overturned a SWAT vehicle and stood on it with a smoke bomb in each hand. George was listening to the SWAT team's report in the helicopter. The lizard man has released a biological agent. All attempts to stop it have failed. He is currently moving north along 7th Avenue. Call over. Parker called Gwen worriedly. Where are you? Peter, I'm at Osmos Industries. You need to leave there immediately. Got it? Parker anxiously asked Gwen to leave. The antidote is being prepared. Gwen looked at the lizard serum being made. She didn't want to fail. No. Connors is rushing there. He will be there soon. He needs the canary device. He wants to use it to infect people throughout the city. Parker anxiously explained Connors' conspiracy to Gwen. There are only 8 minutes left for the antidote. Gwen insisted on waiting until the antidote was ready. You heard what I just said, and you still want to wait for 8 minutes? People there will die. You have to leave immediately. This is an order. Okay. I'll tell everyone to leave. Gwen immediately wanted to evacuate the people in the building after hearing it. You're not listening at all. Gwen. Damn. Are you serious? Gwen hung up the phone before Parker finished speaking, and Parker couldn't help but swear in a hurry. Gwen didn't know how anxious Parker was. She walked to the emergency evacuation device and activated it. The alarm immediately rang throughout the building, and the employees began to evacuate. She is a good girl, responsible. I like it. Otto looked at Gwen, who refused to escape, even though she knew she was in danger, and said to Rose, "Yeah." Rose nodded in agreement. "Listen, if this happens, don't be stubborn. Okay? Promise me." Parker held Gwen's hand and looked at her seriously. After having lunch with Harry left because he had to meet Norman, and Parker came to Gwen to continue teaching her how to control power. Okay. But, who is the stronger one, you say? Gwen squeezed the rubber ball in her hand into a round shape, and she was gradually able to control the power. Tony frowned as he looked at the biological agent released by Connors, and said to Jarvis casually, "Add anti-gas filters and high-power hair dryers to the armor plan. I don't want to become such an ugly guy." Sorry, no offense, Tony said, and then he realized that Banner was right next to him, and hurriedly apologized. Banner shrugged to indicate that it was okay. On the street, a policeman saw Parker swinging a spider web over his head, took out a walkie-talkie and said, "He's going south." Parker was struggling to rush to the Osborne building at this time. When he turned around a building with a spider web, the helicopter George was riding appeared above him. "Stop now, or we will open fire. You are surrounded. You can't escape," George warned Spider-Man below. The helicopter in the sky was chasing Parker, and many SWAT officers with live ammunition rushed up from the top of the building and began to deploy on the roof. They fired electric bombs at Parker, and Parker ran quickly down the stairs with the spider silk in one hand. The SWAT officers' attacks were always one step behind him. Just as Parker turned a corner with the spider silk, a helicopter appeared in front of him. Affected by the searchlight, Parker had to cover his eyes with his hands. The SWAT officers on the helicopter fired electric bombs and hit Parker. He temporarily lost his strength and fell from the air, hitting a taxi passing by below. The SWAT officer slid down with ropes one after another, and a SWAT officer handcuffed his hands behind his back. George slowly walked towards Parker. The SWAT officers on the side kept eliminating the surrounding dangerous situations. George squatted down and wanted to reach out to solve the mystery and see who Spider-Man was. George took off Parker's hood. The moment the hood was taken off, Parker opened his eyes, got rid of the handcuffs in an instant, and flipped George to the ground. Then he fired spider silk to grab a SWAT. The other team members did not dare to shoot because the SWAT was blocking Parker. Parker took the opportunity to cover the faces of 2 SWAT members with spider silk. He kicked the SWAT who was grabbed at the beginning, and then shot down another one with spider silk. A SWAT wanted to shoot, but Parker quickly stepped forward and knocked him to the ground. Then he did a front flip to knock down a SWAT, and fired spider silk to pull away the gun of another SWAT who was aiming at him, and then flipped another SWAT who was close to him, and took his gun away, easily breaking it in two. Then he did another front flip to knock him down with the 2 guns in his hand, but at this time George finally got up and pulled out his pistol, aiming at Parker. "Don't move." Chapter 139. Parker put down the guns in both hands. George panted and looked at Spider-Man in front of him, yelling at him, "Lie on the ground. Put your hands on your head. Hurry up." Parker gritted his teeth and turned his head to slowly stand up and look at George. When he saw Parker's face, George was stunned and unconsciously moved the muzzle down. Parker? It went to us industry. Your daughter is there now. You want me to leave? Parker yelled at George, then slowly approached and picked up the hood on the ground. George looked at Parker in a daze. He never thought that his daughter's boyfriend was actually Spider-Man. He suddenly understood why Parker had a conflict with him. Parker put on the hood and continued to run towards the Osborn building. At this time, a SWAT climbed up. He didn't know what happened, picked up the pistol, and pointed it at Parker. "Don't shoot," George yelled at him, but unfortunately it was too late. The SWAT fired a shot and the bullet passed through Parker's leg. Parker's movements were immediately deformed. He limped onto the roof, ignoring his wounds, and continued to rush towards the Osborn building, leaving only a bloody handprint on the rooftop. "Oh, I'm sorry." Gwen couldn't help but say as she watched her father's men shoot Parker. Parker shook his head. "It's okay. It won't happen now." He pressed against Gwen's forehead, and the two couldn't help but kiss again. Gwen. Oh. Helen came in with 2 cups of tea and saw the two people being intimate and immediately left the room awkwardly. Gwen shyly pushed Parker against the wall with force. "Ah." Parker screamed in pain. "Are you okay, Peter?" Gwen looked at Parker embarrassedly. "Yeah. I'm fine. I'm fine." "Really?" Parker stood up, holding his back, but unfortunately Gwen's bookshelf was smashed by him. At this time, a helicopter was hovering over the Osborn building. The pilot looked at the situation above and said in disbelief, "Okay, Paul. If I didn't see it, I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't risk saying this if that thing wasn't really climbing up the north side of the Osborn building. But remember, it's not human, and it's very strong." The camera gave the outside of the Osborn building. Connors broke the tempered glass with a punch and then rushed in. Gwen, who was waiting for the antidote to be made, found that the lights suddenly began to flicker. She realized that Connors had come. She quickly picked up an alcohol lamp and used it to trigger the building's sprinkler fire system. The Osborn building has very complete fire protection measures. When it senses abnormal temperature, the sprinkler head immediately starts working, spraying a large amount of fire extinguishing gas, and the steel iron door also falls down urgently. 1 minute remaining. The serum production has come to an end. Connors easily broke through the fire iron door and tore a huge hole in it. Connors looked around and saw Gwen hiding in a closet. She didn't dare to breathe. She watched Connors walk past the closet. Connors looked at the canary device. This was the target of his trip. He suddenly smelled a smell and turned to look over there. Gwen was looking outside with fear and trepidation, holding a bottle of spray in her hand. Suddenly Connors' head came over and Gwen screamed in shock. "Gwen." George stood up nervously. Gwen was in danger. This was what he was worried about. He was always afraid that Gwen would be hurt, even if Gwen now had the power of Spider-Man. This was the nature of being a parent. At this time, Matt, who had come to the door of the police station with a huge box, narrowed his eyes and looked at Gwen in danger with a serious expression. Helen Stacy also subconsciously covered her mouth. Would Gwen die like this? Gwen and Parker looked at each other. Parker didn't know whether Gwen could escape successfully. Gwen ignited the spray with an alcohol lamp, and it turned into a flame and burned towards Connors. Connors stretched out his hand to block the flame and didn't care about Gwen and took away part of the canary device in front of her. Gwen was still panting in shock. Seeing that there was no movement outside, she slowly stuck her head out to check and found that Connors had left. At this time, the serum had been made. On the other side, Parker was still on his way to Osborn Industries, but because of his leg injury, he was a little inconvenient to move. He swung the spider silk and hit the wall directly, and almost fell down. He covered the wound on his leg, and looked at the Osborn building, which was still a long way away. Gwen was still waiting for him there. The TV station also kept broadcasting the latest situation. "We got the latest news. This is just received. The New York police asked to evacuate all personnel and vehicles south of 54th Street. Aunt May was watching TV at this time. If you are south of 54th Street, please leave there immediately." Parker dragged his injured leg and struggled to climb the stairs. At the same time, Connors was also climbing the Osborn building with a complete canary device on his back. The searchlight of the helicopter was following it all the time. It seems that Spider-Man is rushing to Osborn Industries. He seems to be injured. I wonder if he can do it. A female reporter on TV was reporting Parker's situation. That's the man. He saved my son on the bridge. Troy looked at Spider-Man on TV and recalled that he had helped him before. At this time, his co-worker came in. Troy, they asked us to evacuate. Something happened in the city center. Troy licked his lips and asked, "Hey, is your friend Matthews the one who drives the crane on 6th Avenue? Yeah. Put him on the phone." Troy stood up and ordered. "The police are evacuating everyone. Who cares about this?" His co-worker didn't understand what Troy meant. "Hurry up and put him on the phone." Troy didn't care about that. He just wanted to help Spider-Man now. At this time, Parker was a little weak. He jumped high and tried to jump over the street, but he didn't expect the bricks on the roof to break as soon as he touched it, so he fell down. Fortunately, there was a fire escape below, and he fell on it. When he got up, he noticed that a large number of people were fleeing in the opposite direction of Osborn Building. He realized that he didn't have much time, so he hurried on his way. After Troy went out, he told his workers, "Hey, Charlie, connect me to Enriquez on 54th Street. Then he took the intercom and said, "Hey, Angelo, come here." Then he shouted to another worker, "Wolski, you have to work overtime." Matthews on 6th Street also received the news and told the workers, "All tower cranes on 6th Street, extend your booms across the street. Adjust the booms to 90 degrees. Spider-Man needs these big guys lined up high. Let's provide him with a clear path. Over." The workers received the order and immediately started to act. A large number of tower cranes began to line up to provide assistance to Parker. When Parker finally struggled to climb to the top of the building, holding his wound and enduring the pain, the tower crane in front had already cast a fast passage for him. Chapter 140. Those who love others will always be loved by others. Those who help others will always be helped by others. There is a reason why Peter Parker has billions of fans. Just like me. Tony looked at the scene in the sky and said narcissistically while sighing, "You?" Rod glanced at Tony, and his expression seemed to say, "How dare you say this?" Recently, Rod found that Tony had disappeared, so he ran to see what he was doing recently. Since the last time, he almost never went out and stayed at home every day. "Is there anything wrong with what I said? I'm the savior." Tony spread his hands and looked at Rod and said. Banner on the side couldn't help but wanted to laugh, but didn't dare to laugh, and he felt a little uncomfortable. Yeah. Dear savior, what are you busy with recently?" Rod rolled his eyes and asked. "Nothing, researching new armor. Can I be included? Can you?" Tony's words made Rod silent, and he walked to the side and sat down silently. Uncle Ben was also very pleased. The citizens were willing to help Peter, which showed that his efforts were not in vain. People remembered Parker's dedication and were willing to do their best for him. Troy was excited, and his children kept cheering and calling him. Troy picked up the little boy and looked at the sky with him. When Toby Spider saw that Garfield Spider was loved by people, he also remembered that he had experienced such a thing in the sky. If it weren't for the people on the bridge, he might have been pierced by the Green Goblin. Parker looked at the tower cranes lined up in front of him, and his heart was greatly encouraged. They were all helping him in their own way, and he couldn't let them down. He looked at the wound on his leg, shot out spider silk to stop the bleeding of the wound, took a deep breath. "Come on, Parker," and the searchlight of the helicopter also shone on him. Parker limped and began to run, running faster and faster. When he reached the edge of the rooftop, he suddenly jumped up and fired spider silk at the tower crane in the distance, but the distance was too far and the spider silk could not reach him, so he fell down. The next second, the swing arm of a tower crane rose, and Parker climbed up by grabbing the steel bars with his hands. He glanced at the cab and saw Troy was operating the tower crane. Parker immediately fired spider silk at the tower crane in front and began to quickly approach the Osborn building. The crane drivers silently watched Spider-Man, and the mounted police were also clearing the road to prevent passers-by from affecting the speed of Parker and the police. When Parker was close enough to Osborn Industries, Connors had already climbed to the top of the building and started to install the Canary device. He didn't dare to delay and immediately jumped onto the wall and fired 2 spider silks upwards, using them as springs to launch himself up. Toby Spider had also used this trick. At this time, Gwen hurriedly ran out of the Osborn building, holding the blue lizard serum in her hand, and happened to meet George to see who came over. Hey. George saw Gwen and quickly opened the car door and ran over. Daddy, I want to give this to Spider-Man. He can stop the lizard man, Gwen said to George while panting. Get in the car. George was more worried about Gwen's safety and wanted her to get in the car and leave this dangerous place first. You don't understand. Gwen resisted. She had to help Parker. I understand. Your boyfriend is the masked man. I know. Give this to me. Get in the car. George explained to Gwen that he already knew Parker's identity. Gwen then handed the serum to him and ran to the side. A police officer pulled her away. Gwen said to George with tears in her eyes, make sure he's okay. George nodded to her and Gwen got on the police car with peace of mind. George looked at the blue potion in his hand, took a deep breath, and went into the building. George sat in the police station office, looked at the man in a suit in front of him, stretched out his hand and said, hello, Mr. Murdoch. Hello, Chief Stacy. Where is Mr. Spider-Man? Matt Murdoch shook hands with George and got straight to the point. He should be at my home with my daughter now. Come over later. Watch today's Sky Screen video first. George raised his hand and asked the police outside the door to bring them coffee. Okay. It seems that they have a good relationship. Matt raised his eyebrows slightly. Yeah. Something happened. Something unexpected. George said as he handed a cup of coffee to Matt. Oh. Matt nodded slightly, took the coffee, and took a sip, but did not ask what's going on. Just as George was taking the serum upstairs, Connors had already put the lizard potion into the canary device at the top of the building, starting the canary device, launching in 2 minutes. Parker looked at Connors' actions and knew that things were imminent. He fired spider silk and spun a circle, using centrifugal force to kick Connors off the spire, but Parker himself was caught by Connors' calf and fell down with him. The two fought in the air and fell on the roof. Parker got up and didn't want to get too entangled with Connors. He wanted to shut down the canary device as soon as possible, but Connors knew Parker's idea very well. When he jumped, he grabbed his calf again and pulled him back. Then he slammed him to the ground and threw him out of the building. Parker fired spider silk to pull himself back to the wall and began to climb up. Just as he was about to reach the top, Connors held a huge liquid nitrogen storage tank and smashed it towards him. Parker dodged flexibly and kept moving sideways. Connors followed Parker's footsteps closely. Parker seized an opportunity to smear Connors' face with spider silk, but Connors was not affected much. He tore off the spider silk and whipped Parker with his tail. He dodged again flexibly and used the elasticity of the spider silk to launch himself up. His legs kicked heavily on Connors' chest, but this only made him retreat 2 steps. Parker fired spider silk again, passed under Connors, and wanted to go directly to the top. Connors failed to attack, and Parker took the opportunity to fire spider silk continuously. But as soon as he climbed onto a small platform, Connors below threw a bottle of liquid nitrogen at him. The exploding liquid nitrogen tank blew Parker back to the bottom. A large amount of liquid nitrogen condensed a large amount of frost on the bottom of the entire spire. Before Parker could catch his breath, Connors rushed towards him, and he quickly pulled himself away with spider silk. Just as he was about to shoot spider silk to break the liquid nitrogen pipeline beside him, Connors rushed in front of him and stepped on the spider silk, then grabbed Parker's hands with both hands, and at the same time, wrapped his tail around Parker's neck. In an instant, Parker's situation was in danger. Chapter 141. Oh. Looks like he's in trouble. Toby Spider frowned as he looked at Garfield Spider's critical situation. He could see that Garfield Spider's strength was indeed not as good as Dr. Lizard's. Even with the help of inertia, he could only push it back a few steps. Now Garfield Spider's hands were caught by it, and his neck was entangled by its tail. If he couldn't get rid of it in time, it would be very bad. Peter, what would you do if it was you? The first generation Gwen looked at Toby Spider and asked curiously. I don't know. If there is no external force, it may be difficult to break free. Maybe I can use my knee to push his chin, and if the strength is enough, I should be able to push it away. But I'm not sure if it will succeed. Toby Spider has never encountered an opponent with a higher strength than him, so he is a little unsure. After all, in reality, he has only beaten Norman, and Norman's strength is not worth mentioning to him. Parker used his foot to push Karnaz's belly, trying to distance himself from it, but Karnaz held him tightly, and at the same time, he squeezed the spider silk launcher between Parker's wrists with both hands. The spider silk launcher could not withstand such a strong force, and was crushed immediately. After Karnaz destroyed the launcher, he pressed Parker's hands together. Even though Parker resisted with all his strength, he still could not resist Karnaz's strength. Karnaz grabbed Parker's hands with one hand and took off Parker's hood with the other claw. Because his whole body was exerting force, Parker's face turned red. Karnaz looked at Parker and sneered, "Poor Peter Parker. No mother, no father, no uncle, alone." Click. At this time, the sound of the bolt was pulled sounded. Karnaz and Parker looked over at the same time, only to see George holding a shotgun in his hand and saying to Karnaz, "He is not alone." Karnaz immediately roared at him, and George shot at the liquid nitrogen pipeline, and the liquid nitrogen inside immediately sprayed out. Parker quickly grabbed it and sprayed it on Karnaz's face. Karnaz subconsciously blocked it with his hand, and Parker took the opportunity to aim the liquid nitrogen at his tail. In an instant, a large amount of frost condensed on his tail. Karnaz could not bear this low temperature, and his tail automatically let go of Parker. After he fell to the ground, he did not stop and continued to aim the liquid nitrogen at Karnaz. Karnaz wanted to attack Parker with his tail, but halfway through the swing, his tail was completely frozen by the liquid nitrogen, and because of the excessive force, the tail broke by itself. George also fired wildly at Karnaz with a shotgun, and a large amount of liquid nitrogen wrapped Karnaz, and most of his body was condensed with frost. Karnaz wanted to attack George first, but halfway through his claws, George shot off half of his palm with one shot. Karnaz looked at his broken palm and was stunned. Parker threw the liquid nitrogen tube in his hand into the pit, where the liquid nitrogen tank was stored on the rooftop, and then ran to help kick Karnaz hard, and kicked him into the pit. After George loaded the bullets, he fired at Karnaz, knocking off the fingers of his other hand, and then fired several shots at the liquid nitrogen tank, to continue blocking Karnaz's actions. "Hey, Gwen's gift for you." George stared at Karnaz while taking out the lizard serum from his pocket and handed it to Parker. After Parker took it, he fired again to break all the remaining liquid nitrogen tanks. "Leave it to me, Peter. Geo," he shouted at Parker, who immediately began to climb up without hesitation. At this time, there were only 30 seconds left before the launch. George reloaded the bullets. At this time, the liquid nitrogen in the pit had been completely poured out. Karnaz raised his arm, and the broken palm began to grow again at an extremely fast speed. George fired at Karnaz continuously, but the bullets could not hurt it at all. The shotgun shell made a hole in it a second ago, and it recovered in a few seconds. Karnaz's hand grew and climbed up immediately. George was still firing at it, but Karnaz was not moved at all. He easily knocked the shotgun out of his hand with a slap. Then he pierced George's body with one claw. The bulletproof vest on his body could not stop Karnaz's attack at all. Even the bulletproof vest on his back was pierced by his claws. Karnaz dealt with George, who was in the way, and immediately looked up and found that Parker had reached the canary device. He immediately dropped George and chased after him. Gwen, who was originally practicing skateboarding with Parker, saw George Stacy being pierced by Karnaz and immediately shouted. Parker looked at George's falling figure in disbelief. "No way, Uncle? Oh, really? Oops." George looked at himself and raised his eyebrows. "Indeed. That monster is so scary, shotgun bullets can't hurt it at all." Matt felt the same way. Connors, who turned into a lizard, was very strong, and ordinary firepower had no effect on it. OMG. Aunt May covered her mouth and looked at the scene in horror. Uncle Ben on the side frowned and couldn't help but sighed. What a disaster. Tony's expression was also a little solemn. He asked Banner and Rhodes on the side, "Do you think I should study biology? This kind of monster that can be mass produced is too scary. I don't want to meet a large group of such monsters." What? Can you handle it? Do you really think you are a god? Rhodes spread his hands and looked at Tony in disbelief. Now Tony is so busy every day and he has to study biology. At this time, Bruce Banner raised his hand. I understand biology. As long as there is a sample, I can research the corresponding serum. Good. Tony turned his head and looked at Banner in admiration so that he wouldn't have to cram at the last minute. Parker stood in front of the canary device and the computer broadcast sounded. Countdown 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. Parker glanced at Connors below, opened the canary device, and took out the green lizard potion. At the same time, Connors climbed up frantically. Seeing that Connors was in time, he flew directly towards Parker and grabbed Parker's legs. At the critical moment, Parker put the blue serum in. As the countdown ended, the canary device was successfully launched. Connors and Parker looked up at the same time. Connors thought he had successfully restrained Parker. The blue serum potion exploded in the sky, forming a beautiful blue cloud. Connors' expression changed, and a drop of blue potion fell on its face, which immediately made it painful. The severe pain made Connors subconsciously cover his face. The next second Connors' lizard eyes and skin turned back to human form. No, it could no longer hold Parker's feet and immediately fell down. Parker immediately climbed onto the small platform and watched Connors fall. Chapter 142. Just as Parker looked down, the small platform he was on also began to tilt because a large amount of liquid nitrogen had previously destroyed the structure of the spire, and it had just been injured by Connors' rough movements. At this time, it could no longer hold on and began to collapse. Parker immediately grabbed the handle behind him to stabilize his body, then jumped down, and the spire fell down immediately after him. The spire hit the wall above the Osborne building heavily, and a large number of fragments broke apart. Parker almost fell down, and he didn't know what he grabbed to avoid falling. He panted and looked at the part of the spire that fell down the building. He turned his head and looked up. It turned out that it was not him who grabbed the thing, but Connors who pulled him with his right hand in lizard form. At this time, Connors still had a lot of lizard skin on his body, but most of his face had returned to human form. He tried hard to pull Parker up, and at this moment his right arm suddenly began to dissipate. Parker wanted to climb up, but before he could use his strength Connors' right arm could not hold him, and Parker almost fell down. Connors immediately pulled him up with his intact left hand. Connors pulled Parker up with all his strength. Parker's legs were finally able to bend and step on the smooth glass outer wall. With the help of Connors' strength, he climbed up again. Seeing Parker pulled up, Connors was also relieved. He sat on the glass slope, looking at his weathered and dissipated right hand, and silently shed tears. He felt that he could not find his right hand after all, and regretted that he had done so many evil things. He almost killed Peter Parker. At this time, he suddenly remembered George who was stabbed by him, Sheriff. Parker also immediately recalled George and ran to find him, Sheriff. At this time, George was lying on the side covered in blood, holding a pistol in his hand and breathing heavily. Seeing Parker running over, he asked, "Where is the lizard?" "It's okay. We stopped it." Parker immediately told him that everything was over and they won. Okay. George also relaxed after hearing this. "Let's get out of here. Come on." Parker wanted to send George for treatment, but George grimaced in pain when he moved. "Look at me, hold on. The paramedics are coming." Parker looked at him and said, but his words were interrupted by George. You have to leave before they get there, okay?" George didn't want Parker's identity to be exposed. "I'm not going anywhere." Parker looked at him and shook his head. "I wronged you, Peter. This city needs you. Take it, you will need this." George handed Parker's mask to him, which Connors had taken off before. Parker took the hood from his hand, and George looked at the big boy. "You will make countless enemies. It is inevitable that someone will get hurt. Sometimes it is your closest person, so I want you to promise me one thing, okay? Don't involve Gwen. Promise me. HMM." Parker listened to George's words, pursed his lips, tears welled up in his eyes, and recalled every bit of his time with Gwen. "Promise me." George looked at Parker expectantly. He didn't want his daughter to be in danger. Parker trembled his lips, nodded with tears in his eyes, and George smiled slightly and slowly closed his eyes. After seeing Parker agreed. Oh. Parker looked at George, who had lost his voice, and the tears in his eyes finally fell. He squatted beside George's body, choking and shouting heartbreakingly. He slowly stood up and looked at George, not knowing how to face Gwen and his promise to George. He walked to the edge of the building in a daze, looking at the large lights below and the blue particles in the sky, looking at what George said before he died. Many citizens felt the same way, especially those with children, who didn't want their children to be in danger. Although George did a lot of wrong things in dealing with Spider-Man, it is undeniable that he is a good policeman, dedicated and responsible, and even risked his life to help Parker, and finally lost his life. As a father, he is selfish. For the safety of his daughter, he forced Parker to agree to leave Gwen. But as a policeman, he is undoubtedly responsible and willing to sacrifice. George has always misunderstood Spider-Man, but in the end he also believes that the city cannot live without him. His bravery and sacrifice changed the views of most citizens on him and the police, and it can be regarded as a redemption of the many times he was targeted before. The reputation of Spider-Man has dropped sharply. Dad. Gwen looked at George lying on the ground with tears in her eyes. Parker slowly hugged her, and Gwen cried in Parker's arms. It's okay. Uncle will be fine. I won't let what happened in the sky happen. Parker hugged Gwen tightly and comforted her. Oh. Helen Stacy wiped the tears from her eyes, and her little son asked sadly, will Dad die? No. He won't die, she said, touching his head. The first generation Uncle Ben sighed. Parents are pitiful. Stacy was thinking about Gwen's safety until she died. Aunt May nodded beside him. In his opinion, it is too dangerous for Gwen to be with Peter. Peter has many enemies and he doesn't know when he will hurt her. Fortunately, our Gwen is protected by Venom. After the Eddie incident, Toby Spider controlled Venom to return to Gwen again. After that dangerous thing happened, he was no longer worried about Gwen being alone. Venom was completely under his control and could perform the task of protecting Gwen well. Yeah. The first generation Uncle Ben nodded. Toby Spider had told them that Gwen had Venom, which was also a reassurance for them, especially after the Eddie incident. The boiled egghead looked at George, who died in the sky, and slowly exhaled. Then he lowered his head and squinted his eyes to look at the analysis report in his hand. His eyes gradually became serious. I'm afraid this is not a coincidence. I need more evidence. There are many blue rain mists floating in the sky. The police officers are carrying the SWAT team members who were infected by the lizard smoke. The SWAT team members watched their bodies begin to recover after contacting the particles. A terrible tranquility enveloped the entire New York City. It seems that a powdered mist dissolving agent was launched from the Osborne Industrial Building. It seems that these blue powders seem to offset the biological toxins. Residents of Lower Manhattan can rest assured, because Dr. Kurt Connors, the planner of this terrorist incident, has been arrested. John Niles reports to you in Lower Manhattan. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143. Aunt May was making milk at home while listening to the report on TV. At this time, Parker opened the door and returned home exhausted. She saw Parker's embarrassed appearance and her heart tightened. Parker saw Aunt May staring at him with wide eyes, and he closed his eyes awkwardly and dared not look at her, with a stiff smile on his lips. Aunt May slowly walked to Parker and looked at him sadly. She didn't know what Parker had experienced. She only saw that he was covered with bruises. Parker smiled lightly, took off his backpack, and took out a box of eggs from it, which were organic. Aunt May burst into tears and laughed, hugged Parker. Dear, it's okay. Everything will be fine. Everything will be fine. Aunt May stroked the back of Parker's head and said she thought it was the chaos outside that made Parker so embarrassed. Peter, he still remembers buying eggs for you. This time he kept your words in mind. Uncle Ben glanced at Aunt May, who was wiping tears from her eyes with a tissue. George's death made her very sad. Uncle Ben sighed at Parker's growth, from a half-grown boy who got superpowers by chance to Spider-Man. Peter, will you listen to your father and leave me? Gwen wiped her tears and looked at Parker. No, I will never leave you. Parker hugged Gwen tightly. Really? Yeah. Parker didn't say anything more and kissed her directly. The two hugged and kissed each other, feeling each other's heart. In the heavy rain, many police officers came to see George Stacy off with umbrellas. Parker was soaked and hid on the eaves, looking at the crowd below. Gwen, dressed in black, walked alone with an umbrella. She seemed to feel Parker's presence. She looked up, and Parker immediately avoided her sight. Gwen looked around, but couldn't see the most important Peter. She silently held up her umbrella again and walked forward. Outside Parker's house, Gwen leaned on her umbrella and looked inside. Parker came out of the house, opened the door, and lowered his eyebrows, not daring to look at Gwen's face. Gwen looked at him with red eyes. Where have you been? Parker pursed his lips, wanting to say something but stopping. He looked around, but didn't dare to look at Gwen directly. Gwen looked at Parker sadly. My father passed away. The funeral was just held. They fired a salute and gave a eulogy. 2 teachers also went, and Flesh also went. Everyone except you went. Her eyes slowly filled with tears, and finally overflowed and flowed down. Parker looked at her sad appearance, and didn't know how to comfort her. He reached out his hand to wipe the tears from her face. I can't. Looking at her, Parker's eyes gradually became red. He wanted to be with Gwen, but every time he did so, he would think of what George said before he died. I can't go. I can't. I'm sorry. I can't. Parker shook his head frantically, his eyes always looking elsewhere. He didn't dare to face Gwen. He was afraid that he couldn't help it. What are you talking about? Gwen looked at Parker puzzled. I can't meet you again. I can't. Parker's eyes slowly moistened, looking at the person he loved most, but couldn't hold her in his arms. Gwen couldn't believe that Parker would say such a thing. She shook her head slightly, opened her umbrella, and turned to leave. Halfway through, Gwen suddenly reacted and looked at Parker with tears in her eyes. He asked you to promise him, right? Stay away from me from now on. This way I will be safe. Parker lowered his head and said nothing. Gwen left Parker's house in despair. Parker at home closed the door and lay on it, lowering his head and not daring to cry. Aunt May witnessed all this and walked over and said, "What a beautiful girl." Yeah. Parker was suddenly startled when he heard Aunt May's voice and immediately pretended to be fine. Uncle Ben said the same thing. Did you ask her out? Parker shook his head. Why? Aunt May looked at Parker in confusion. She could see that Parker really liked Gwen. I can't do this. Parker lowered his head and didn't dare to look at Aunt May. He didn't want Aunt May to see him crying. Why? Aunt May didn't know what happened between Parker and Gwen. She won't be happy with me, Parker said with his eyes closed. Hearing this, Aunt May walked up to him and stared at Parker. Peter Parker, as long as she is with you, she will be happy. Anyone who has doubts about this can talk to me. Parker, listen to Aunt May's recognition of him. She always believed that Peter Parker would be a promising person. Her words illuminated the fog deep in Parker's heart and made him gradually firm up his heart. Oh. Pepper wiped her eyes, a little sad that Peter Parker had to separate from Gwen like this. They obviously loved each other so much. Alas. Tony poured a glass of wine for Odd and the others, and then silently took a glass and drank it all. Fate is so cruel. Peter Parker can only choose to stay away from Gwen because of George's last words. Uncle Ben looked at Peter Parker, who was sitting with Gwen, and smiled with relief at the way they matched. I always thought you could do great things in the future. I have always thought so, since you were a child, and so did your Aunt May. Aunt May nodded beside him. Helen Stacy brought a plate of fruit to them in the kitchen, and said to Parker, I'm as optimistic about you as your uncle and aunt, Peter. Parker nodded gently, and Gwen sat beside him, and smiled at Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Uncle Ben and the others were invited by George today, saying that there was something important to tell them. Just as Helen and Aunt May were chatting about family matters, George came back. Dad? His son Howard looked at George, who suddenly returned home with some surprise. George touched his head, followed by Matt Murdoch carrying a huge box. Matt silently put the box on the ground, then turned around and closed the door. George wanted to take the box in format, but his face changed as soon as he started because the box was unbelievably heavy. At the same time, Parker in the room suddenly felt something strange. He walked into the corridor and saw George, who was bending over and trying to pick up the box, and Matt Murdock next to him. His expression became a little solemn. His spider sense told him that the man in front of him was not ordinary. "Let me do it." Matt picked up the box and smiled at George. George looked at him in surprise. He had always thought that the box was just big, but he didn't expect it to be so heavy. Matt made a gesture to him to invite him, and George reacted and led the way in front of him. Matt walked in front of Parker, stretched out his hand and smiled. "Mr. Spider-Man, it's an honor to meet you. My name is Matt Murdock. Just call me Parker." Parker was stunned for a moment before shaking hands with him. Chapter 144. Parker returned to the room, took out his cell phone, hesitated for 2 seconds, and then pressed the recording of the call Uncle Ben had made to him. "Peter, I know things have been tough lately, and I'm sorry about that. I may understand how you feel. Since you were a child, your life has been accompanied by so many troubles." Parker was tidying up the things on the table while listening to Uncle Ben's voice. He had heard it many times, but he never tired of listening. There were photos of the murderer on the wall, photos of Richard Parker and his wife, and photos of Uncle Ben when he was young. Well, someone once said that the things that bring us down will also make us great. If anyone is destined to be great, it must be you, kid. Parker wore his hood as always. When he walked through a street, he saw many boys running past. He looked in the direction where the boys came out and saw a huge red spider painted on the wall, which was the one on his battlesuit. "This is a gift from God. You just need to figure out how to use it. So no matter how far it takes you, we are always here. So go home. Peter, you are my hero. I love you." Uncle Ben covered his face a little embarrassedly. It didn't matter when Aunt May was alone at home, but it was a bit embarrassing to say this when George was here and Matt was watching him. But he quickly adjusted his mood and looked at Parker. "You will always be our pride, Peter, but don't belittle yourself. Be down to earth. We will always support you." Aunt May nodded on the side, and Helen also smiled and nodded to echo Uncle Ben's words. Only a few children kept looking at Parker with an admiring look. George waved his hand and asked Helen to take the children back to the room. They still had important things to do next. Matt opened his box, which was filled with documents. "What is this?" Parker and Uncle Ben looked at the documents in the box and asked Matt and George. "Peter, do you remember when I was with the mayor before, I said that if I had money later, I could buy the house?" George smiled at Parker. "Yeah, I remember, but I don't have that much money." Parker nodded. The mayor generously gave him a priceless villa, and he was very grateful in his heart. "Now your money is here." George glanced at Matt. Matt took out a thick stack of documents from the box, put the top one in front of Parker, and handed part of it to Uncle Ben. Parker took it and took a look. Except for the top one, the others were written with a copyright agreement between a certain company and Spider-Man. Parker flipped through them and found that these documents were almost all about this content. "What is this?" Parker looked at the two of them in confusion. George knew what Parker was thinking and took the initiative to explain. "This is the agreement required by all companies or factories around the world that use the name and shape of Spider-Man, as well as the authorization letter for Matt, a lawyer. Matt, a lawyer, was specially hired by the mayor to represent you. You only need to sign these documents. Matt will collect Spider-Man's copyright fees from these companies on your behalf. These copyright fees are enough for you to live a good life and buy that villa. Peter, you don't think that those companies that use the name of Spider-Man don't have to pay you, the genuine Spider-Man, do you?" George looked at Parker deeply. From now on, Parker's life will definitely not be as difficult as Toby Spider. "Mr. Parker, this will be a huge sum of money. You authorize us, and we will help you determine whether the company using Spider-Man IP meets the requirements. If it meets the requirements, we will ask him to pay the copyright fees, and if it does not meet the requirements, we will ask the other party to stop infringing." Matt looked at Parker and said seriously, "You must know that the spread of the Sky Curtain is all over the world. Almost every country and every region has related products about Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Those who produce the Toby Spider look are exempt from paying copyright fees. After all, Toby Spider can't come to ask for money, but all other Spider-Man related ones must be paid because the mayor of New York has reported the matter to the White House, and the White House will certainly not refuse an extra tax, so they put pressure on the United Nations, which led to Matt's visit. This is very beneficial to everyone. The mayor has achieved political achievements, you have made a lot of money, and lawyer Matt has earned a great reputation and a lot of money. Matt smiled slightly. This is indeed a very beneficial thing for him, although this matter may take him several years, because he has to travel all over the world. Besides, for the mayor, this is not just a political achievement. Do you know how much the houses around your villa are worth now? No rich man would not want to live closer to Spider-Man. As far as I know, even some top stars and top rich people are scrambling for the villas around there, and the security measures are several times stronger than before, because it is now a top rich area. George's words opened Parker's eyes. He never thought that there were so many twists and turns in the villa given to him by the mayor. There was even a lot of information that even George didn't know, but even so it was enough to shock him. Parker looked at the documents on the table and the big box underneath, and swallowed his saliva involuntarily. This was almost wealth at his fingertips. He looked at Uncle Ben for help, but Uncle Ben was suddenly a little overwhelmed. He had never seen such a huge fortune in his life. He knew that, even if he worked for another 100 years, he would not earn 1/10,000th of this money. George knew what they were worried about, so he decided to hold the discussion at his home, because he didn't want Parker to be too stressed. Peter, you deserve this money. Even without the first generation, you would still have this wealth. Those companies can't avoid the copyright barrier, and the people above won't allow it. George Stussy persuaded Parker and Uncle Ben. After hesitating for a while, Parker picked up the pen and started to sign the documents, while Gwen was responsible for helping him to check the documents to avoid loopholes. Watching his daughter carefully helping Peter Parker check the documents, George kept sighing in his heart that girls can't be kept when they grow up. He had never seen such a serious attitude. Although Uncle Ben was not well educated, he was not stupid. He knew that George would not harm Peter in such a matter. It would not be good for him, Gwen, or anyone else, because Spider-Man's fans are all over the world. You should know that the reports of fans besieging the city government and the police station were continuous some time ago. Among the large number of fans, there were even New York government officials, including some police and soldiers. Chapter 145. On campus, Parker was sorting his backpack while constantly turning his head to look at Gwen on the other side. He would peek and then lower his head, but he couldn't help looking. Flesh came up from behind Parker and suddenly hugged Parker, who was startled by him. Good morning. Parker. Hey. Are you okay? Gwen heard the two people's playful voices, turned her head to look, and then turned back. You're here, man. Flesh let go of Parker and smiled at him. Hearing his words, Parker smiled and then saw the spider pattern on his clothes. This clothes is really nice. Hearing this, Flesh lowered his head and looked at the spider on his chest and agreed. Yeah, this guy's awesome. Girls like him. Parker subconsciously lowered his head and shook his head without saying anything. Gwen closed the door of the locker and walked silently from behind Parker. The two people who were once close to each other were like strangers who didn't know each other. Parker held his backpack and dared not look at Gwen. He could only stand there with his head down. He didn't know what to do. I have a professor who once told his students that all novels can't escape 10 plots. Now I tell you that he is wrong. There is only one plot. Who am I? A black female teacher was giving a lecture on the stage. Parker came in late from the door. Mr. Parker, you are late again. Well, at least you are still here. Parker walked past Gwen. Gwen subconsciously turned her head away from him. After sitting down, Parker said apologetically, sorry, Ms. Ritter. I won't be late again. I promise. Ms. Ritter looked at Parker deeply. Don't make promises you can't keep. Mr. Parker. Parker sat behind Gwen and whispered, yeah, but promises are the best words. Gwen, who was still swaying slightly in front of her, paused immediately after hearing this. She heard the inner meaning of Parker's words and couldn't help but curl her lips slightly. In the dark night, Parker watched the police whizzing by below, turned over and jumped onto the tower crane, and then used her spider silks to launch himself like a fighter plane. Using spider silks to quickly rush to where he is needed in high-rise buildings and narrow alleys. The last picture freezes on one hand holding the spider silk and the other hand launching the spider web. Great. Peter Parker has decided to be with Gwen. An old man looked at the sky with relief. Yeah. Although George's words made Parker a treat for a while, Aunt May gave him confidence. He hesitated in the corridor for an unknown period of time before he mustered up the courage to say that sentence. Dude, you have to believe that you are the best. You are Spider-Man. A black guy shouted at the sky. Many people can understand what Peter Parker is thinking. As outsiders, they can see Parker's performance very clearly. From the pain of breaking up with Gwen at the beginning, to the hesitation after Aunt May encouraged him, to the firmness when he finally expressed his true thoughts in class. Good. Tony looked at Garfield Spider with satisfaction. Even if there were thousands of difficulties and dangers ahead, it could not stop me from loving you. He felt that Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker were really a match made in heaven. Both of them were academic masters, and Gwen was willing to take risks to help Peter Parker. If it weren't for the serum that Gwen made at the risk of her life, Kana's plan would have really succeeded. Banner also recalled his former girlfriend, but unfortunately the two of them finally broke up. The first generation Gwen leaned on Toby Spider, suddenly stood up, and said to him, "Peter, teach me to fight." What? Toby Spider looked at her puzzledly, not understanding why she had such an idea. "I don't want me to be a burden to you. To protect my safety, you have to leave the venom with me, so that you can't become stronger, so I want to help you." She looked at Toby Spider seriously and said, "But," before Toby Spider finished speaking, the first generation Gwen blocked his mouth with his hand. "Listen to me, I know you are worried about my safety, so you let the venom stay on my clothes, but I can't help you at all, and it's a waste of its combat power." She looked at the venom on her chest. The venom that had eliminated its weaknesses and had no side effects was too luxurious to be used only to protect her. "I want to learn from her. She is just an ordinary person, but she dares to take the risk of making serum. I have venom. If I use it well, I can help you too." The first generation Gwen looked up at the sky, and when she saw the second generation Gwen to add after Fenny Spider dared to take the risk, she felt that she could also fight for Toby Spider. She looked at Toby Spider with affection. Toby Spider looked at her eyes and knew that she was serious. He put her hand on his face and said softly, "Okay." Seeing that Toby Spider agreed to her, Gwen excitedly pulled him up. "Then come on. What should we do?" Toby Spider smiled slightly. "Venom." With his order, venom instantly wrapped around the first generation Gwen, showing her curvy figure perfectly. Wow. This was the first time she really felt the power of venom. The last time she was shot, she was only panicking and didn't realize that she was a superpower when she put on venom. Peter Parker didn't know how many pens he accidentally broke. He only knew that his wrist seemed to be not his own. It took him more than a day to sign his name. After signing, he began to lose control of his strength, so he broke one pen after another. Matt didn't stay here all the time. He left the documents at George's house not long ago. He had some other things to deal with, and Gwen was a top student. She had understood most of the documents in a short time. When the last document was signed, Parker couldn't help but throw the pen into the trash can beside him, took a deep breath, and fell back on the chair. God knows how he wrote it. "Have a glass of water. I'll feed you." Gwen brought a glass of water because Parker's hands were shaking a little at this time, and Gwen was afraid that he would accidentally crush the cup. "Thank you." Parker drank the water in one breath and couldn't help complaining, "I don't think I want to see these documents at all now." Ha ha ha. Gwen couldn't help laughing. As an accompanying person, she watched Parker go from a calm face to a painful face all the way. Helen called George and told him that Parker had signed all the documents. George notified Matt to come to the police station, and Parker also went to the police station with these documents. Soon, with the witness of George and the invited notary, Parker formally authorized lawyer Matt Murdoch to collect the copyright fees on his behalf. Chapter 146. In the prison, several prison guards sent Connors to a cell. He couldn't see anything in the dark room. He walked to the bed and sat down. With the help of the lightning outside the window, he saw that he was wearing a yellow prison uniform. From the messy beard on his face, it can be seen that his condition is not very good. As the lightning flashed, Connors realized that there was another person in the cell. "Hello, doctor. Have you told the boy?" a voice asked from the dark corner. "Tell him what?" Connors looked around, looking for the figure in the dark. "Have you told the child the truth about his father?" The other party appeared from the darkness. It turned out that he had been standing under the window. "No. That's great. So let's leave him alone now." The gentleman paced slowly. "You should stay away from him." Connors looked at him and roared angrily, accompanied by lightning and thunder outside the window. Peter Parker, who had just returned to his new home, didn't expect that there would be a hidden content after the sky curtain was played, but he was sure that Dr. Connors must know something, so he immediately stood up and wanted to find Connors. Parker had asked Connors before, but Connors kept saying that he didn't know. Although he was lying, he didn't know the specific situation and only knew a rough idea. Connors looked at the Easter egg and closed his eyes silently. What was coming would come eventually. The death of Richard Parker and his wife would be useless, even if Logitruta refused to let go. Although the sky curtain had not been completely exposed, it also let the world know that he knew some inside information, and he had been hesitating whether to tell Parker during this period. Just when Parker wanted to find Connors, Uncle Ben held him back, and Parker turned around and looked at Uncle Ben in confusion. "Peter, we haven't told you because we're afraid you can't accept it," Uncle Ben said in a low voice. "What?" Parker frowned and looked at Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Uncle Ben sighed and pulled Parker to sit down. "A few days after the funeral, 2 government officials came to us. They said that the genetic research done by your father and Norman Osborn was very valuable, and someone was willing to pay a high price to buy it. So he fled with the research results. They said he was a traitor. We don't believe it at all, Peter. They said he betrayed his best friend for money. Betrayed us." Uncle Ben and Aunt May recalled the situation back then. 2 FBI officers came to their door, forcing them to believe this fact. I don't understand. I don't believe it. This is impossible." Parker certainly didn't believe this. In fact, even Uncle Ben and Aunt May began to doubt this situation after watching the conversation between Connors, Logitruta and the mysterious man in the sky curtain, and the search of Parker's home. But they had no evidence and dared not tell anyone. Uncle Ben solemnly warned Parker to keep calm and not reveal this situation to see if the sky curtain would expose the real cause of Richard Parker's death. Moreover, Peter Parker already has billions of fans at this moment, and the sky curtain is obviously optimistic about Peter Parker, which makes the people hiding behind the scenes afraid to act rashly. If the sky curtain is still far away, then those fans are the biggest obstacle close at hand. No one is a fool. At this time, if anyone near Peter Parker has an accident, the murderer will be equated with the mastermind behind the murder of Richard Parker and his wife. No one dares to take this risk. Parker didn't know whether to believe the FBI's words. He wanted to go to Gwen to tell her, and Uncle Ben didn't stop him this time. At the same time, people all over the world began to talk about it, constantly speculating who this mysterious person is, and other foreign personnel put pressure on the US government. Ask them to investigate the truth of the death of Richard Parker and Mary Parker, and let them give Spider-Man Peter Parker justice. The gentleman himself also knows that he is now at the cusp of the storm. He must hide himself, otherwise it will be very troublesome if he is found by Peter Parker or others. Toby Spider frowned slightly. The death of Garfield Spider's parents was not an accident, it must be murder. There is no doubt about this. What about his own parents? Was it an accident? At this moment, there was a knock on the door. He walked over and opened the door. He found 2 agents in suits. They showed their IDs to Parker. It clearly said CIA. "Hello, Mr. Spider-Man." One of them smiled and stretched out his hand to Toby Spider. Toby Spider shook it and asked in confusion, "Who are you?" "We are here to explain to you the story of your father Richard Parker and your mother Mary, the cause of Mary Parker's death." Your father Richard Parker is actually an agent of the US Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. His wife is Mary Parker, Richard's partner and data analyst. Both husband and wife are intelligence agents working for the US government. But during a mission, the Parkers pretended to be traitors and infiltrated the enemy. Unfortunately, they were exposed and died in a plane crash. The first generation Uncle Ben and his friends never knew how Richard and his wife died. So this is the truth. Toby Spider didn't understand why they didn't reveal the truth to him until now. The CIA agent told him that this was to protect Peter Parker. Many times, if he didn't know about this, he wouldn't be in danger. Now that Toby Spider has become Spider-Man, they wanted to continue to conceal it, but unfortunately Sky Curtain exposed the secret of Richard and his wife's death, forcing them to visit them. Toby Spider had just sent away 2 CIA agents, and then he welcomed 2 people from the law firm. They came to discuss a copyright fee for the Spider-Man IP, because the second generation Spider-Man Peter Parker appeared, which caused a conflict with the relevant documents signed before about the name Peter Parker. That's right, Toby Spider has already signed a letter of authorization for major factories and companies to use the IP of Spider-Man, but now there are some problems due to the emergence of the second generation, and Toby Spider needs to re-sign a document to distinguish the difference between the first and second generation Spider-Man. Toby Spider doesn't care about this loss. Although major companies can use the image of Garfield Spider to replace Toby Spider, and use the image of Toby Spider to replace Garfield Spider, the name of Spider-Man still needs to pay. Even if they exploit loopholes, it is still a huge amount of money, so Toby Spider no longer worries about life at this time, and even his life can be very rich. But even if they have money, they still choose to stick to being Spider-Man, because Uncle Ben doesn't want Parker to indulge in money. Fortunately, the 2 Peter Parkers are very competitive, and did not let them down. Chapter 147. Many things happened during the silence of the sky. Before the investigators entered Osborn Industries and found him, McCann finally completely passed the responsibility of the Spider experiment to Legitrator. He forged false evidence that Legitrator authorized human experiments. He completely removed his role in it and deleted all the evidence that was unfavorable to him. In this way, as long as Legitrator kept his mouth shut, he could rest assured. The reason he could do this was that Norman Osborn died. He was so stimulated by Legitrator's suicidal behavior in the sky and the ups and downs of cross-species gene transplantation that he died before he could even hold on to the original time. Harry came back early. Norman died early. Everything seemed to be predetermined. Norman Osborn's sudden death caused some turmoil in Osborn Industries. McCann took advantage of Harry's failure to take over the company to get everything done. Not long after he cleared himself of responsibility, Legitrator had a car accident during the FBI's transfer. It seemed to be a simple accident. The tire of the oncoming truck burst, broke through the guardrail and flew away. He and the 3 FBI officers guarding him in the car died on the spot, and the truck driver also died. When the public and Parker learned about this, they felt unbelievable at the first time. That was the FBI. In this country, the FBI is synonymous with rampant tyranny. How could they kill people from the FBI? No one believed that this would be an accident. Even if it was an accident, someone must be held responsible for it. The New York FBI was under unprecedented pressure. For the first time, they witnessed the power of the fanatical fans who were endless. Even many foreign countries were watching the joke of America. The president was furious and ordered all relevant personnel to suspend their duties for investigation. At the same time, the FBI director was also questioned because the FBI's transfer of Legitrator was a secret operation and few people knew about it. Peter Parker didn't know what secrets Legitrator was hiding. Now that he was dead, his only hope to know whether his parents really betrayed the country was Skybound. He also looked for Connors, but Connors didn't know who the mysterious man was. He told Parker that Norman Osborn must have been connected to the other party, but it was a pity that Norman was dead. In the first generation universe, Gwen was wrapped in venom and was fighting with Toby Spider. Gwen was attacking, and Toby Spider was dodging. Since Gwen asked Toby Spider to teach her to fight a month ago, this situation would happen occasionally. The first generation Harry came to Toby Spider's door and knocked on the door. Toby Spider heard the knock, raised his hand to signal Gwen to stop, and then went downstairs. Gwen exhaled lightly, and the venom slowly retracted on her clothes. Toby Spider was a little surprised by Harry's sudden arrival. "Hey, brother, it looks good," Harry said to Toby Spider with a box in his hand. "Yeah. Why are you here? What is this?" Toby Spider made way, then looked at the box in Harry's hand, and asked in confusion. "Surprise." Harry smiled slightly, and walked into the house. Toby Spider shrugged and followed him. "Hi, Harry." Aunt May looked at Harry and greeted him. Uncle Ben was not at home. Since Parker got the first copyright fee, Uncle Ben no longer had to go to work. Because he was very idle, he had to find something to do. It happened that he had recently found a new hobby, so he was often not at home. "Hey, Aunt May." Harry nodded to her, sat on the chair, and put the box on the table. "What is this?" Aunt May looked at the box, and was a little confused. "Hey, man, what is this? I'm curious." Toby Spider walked to Harry and sat down. "Why don't you open it yourself?" Harry smiled gently, and pushed the box in front of him. Toby Spider looked at Harry, shook his head and slowly opened the box, only to see a brand new red and blue spider suit inside. "Wow. So cool." Toby Spider picked up the new spider suit, and Aunt May was also surprised when she saw it. "Isn't it great? I asked the company's employees to make it. It uses the best materials, and has many functions. You won't feel itchy when you wear it. It is extremely breathable, and has a good touch, but the most important thing is that it is bulletproof, and can be pierced by sharp blades." Harry proudly introduced the suit to Toby Spider. This is a suit that Harry specially tailored for Toby Spider. "Try it on, Peter. See if it fits." Harry urged Toby Spider to change quickly. He couldn't wait to see what he looked like in this suit. Aunt May also nodded to Toby Spider, so he took the suit and quickly went upstairs. After a while, he put on the suit and came down. "Cool, man. How does it feel?" Harry looked at Toby Spider and asked curiously. "Very good. Very comfortable, this fabric." "Thank you, Harry." Toby Spider stroked the suit on his body and thanked sincerely. "You're welcome." Harry hugged Toby Spider and said with a big laugh. He was very happy to help his good brother Harry. "Oh, there is one more thing. I have developed a physical enhancer, although it is a version exclusive to me." "What? Did it succeed so quickly?" Toby Spider looked at Harry with wide eyes. From the time Harry told him that he restarted the research on physical enhancers to now, it has only been a few months at most. "No, it's not a real success. It's just my own. Do you remember the potion that Cheyenne Mook gave you to cure my father?" Harry shook his head and denied Toby Spider's idea. "Yeah, I used that potion to cure my uncle." Toby Spider nodded. That was the first time he received a reward from the Sky Curtain. He had a deep memory of it. "My father's extraordinary ability was not lost. The potion just eliminated his evil personality. He told me after he learned that I had restarted the research. He didn't dare to reveal it before that. I secretly took a tube of his blood for research, and then I got the latest physical enhancer without side effects. But it seems that, because it was extracted from my father, only I can use it. Experiments with other organisms failed to succeed. To be honest, I thought I had failed, but there was a voice in the dark telling me that only I could use that physical enhancer." Harry told about the strange situation he encountered in his dream at that time. Now it seems that only the Sky Curtain can do this, but Harry doesn't understand why the Sky Curtain does this. Toby Spider also shook his head. He couldn't figure out the reason, but no matter what, Harry got the enhancement without side effects, which is a good thing. At this time, Gwen also changed her clothes and walked down the stairs. She saw Toby Spider in a brand new battle suit. "What is this?" "Harry gave it to me. It's great." Toby Spider looked at Gwen excitedly. Hearing this, the first generation Gwen looked at Harry in surprise. Harry smiled at her. He had to admit that Gwen was really more suitable for Parker than Mary Jane. The two of them standing there looked like a golden boy and a jade girl. Chapter 148. Tony looked at the countdown in front of him. This was the time he calculated, based on the time when the Sky Curtain was silent and then replayed. If his calculation was correct, the Sky Curtain would start a new playback soon. As the countdown gradually returned to 0, the sky curtain lit up as expected. Tony was relieved to see this. He was afraid that the sky curtain would have a long time like the interval between the first and second generations. A watch appeared on the screen, and a man was typing. He could be seen wearing a pair of glasses and deleting something on the computer. Then he took out potassium chloride from the cabinet and inserted it into the jar containing many spiders. With the rapid release of potassium chloride, these super spiders died one after another. After Richard Parker confirmed that all the spiders were dead, he reached out and took the employee card on the table. He swiped the card to enter the laboratory, but suddenly found that the laboratory was about to be closed, and the alarm sounded. He couldn't open the door of the laboratory, so he hurried back to check his computer. It showed that his username was invalid and the file was frozen. Richard Parker was furious, but had no choice but to put a document in his bag, which was the bag that Peter Parker found. He ran out of Osborn building with the bag. People will think I have committed a crime of the devil. Maybe they are right. I always thought I could have more time. Richard Parker was talking to the computer in the picture, and then the voice of young Parker sounded. Dad, Dad. Hearing his son's call, Richard hurriedly turned off the computer, got up and ran upstairs. Peter? He pushed open his study and saw a messy room with a lot of documents scattered on the floor, and little Peter Parker was looking at him in horror behind his desk. Then there was the scene where Richard Parker handed little Peter Parker to Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Peter. Gwen looked at Parker worriedly. At this time, his expression was a little gloomy. Once again, watching his parents hand him over to Uncle Ben when he was young and never return, he was reminded of the bad memories. He never believed that his parents would betray their country and sell him out for profit. Legitrator was dead, and he could only believe that Cheyenne Mew could help him find the answer. Tony was a little happy that he had successfully predicted the broadcast time of Cheyenne Mew, but then he frowned and watched Richard start to run away. It was obvious that the spiders destroyed by Richard Parker must be the super spiders he had researched. And OS Industries had already noticed that Richard wanted to destroy the files, but it seemed that he failed. Fortunately, he did not write down the most important 00 decay rate algorithm on the computer, but wrote it in a notebook and took it away. He did not know that Richard Parker and his wife were convicted of treason by the FBI, so he felt that Richard had a deeper reason to destroy these spiders, just like he suddenly wanted to destroy all the armor. This is not realistic at all. On the plane, Mary Parker sat opposite Richard Parker. I found a safe place to spend the night in Lake Geneva. Are you uploading? Mary glanced at Richard and asked. Upload all to Roosevelt, just in case. He shook his head subconsciously. Although he didn't want to believe it, he knew that it would be difficult for them to escape the pursuit. Mary Parker sighed when she heard this, and Richard comforted her. We will be fine. Mary. Did you see his expression? He will never understand. Mary was thinking more about her son at this time, and she was always worried about him. Mary, we have discussed it. Our past life is gone forever. From now on, we have to be careful every moment. We can't let him grow up in this environment. Richard didn't want to leave his son, but he had no choice. For his own good, he could only leave him with Ben Parker. He's just a child. Mary was always worried about Peter Parker. I know, but he will be fine. He will be fine. Richard reached out and grabbed Mary's hand, constantly comforting her. Mary wiped the tears from her face with sobs, nodded, and stood up to walk towards the toilet. At this time, the co-pilot walked out of the cab. You can't rest, even if you are so tired, right? Richard nodded. I'm afraid so. This should be considered an occupational disease. The driver smiled at him, turned on the faucet, and started washing his hands, and asked casually, what are you busy with? Richard was about to reply when he suddenly saw the bright red blood on his hand. His face changed immediately, and he pretended to be calm and said, it's just a plan in advance. Can I talk to the pilot? The co-pilot knew that he was most likely exposed, but he still smiled and said, is there anything you need? Maybe I can help. He wiped his hands with a towel. I want to send a radio message to make sure that everything is arranged when we land. Richard wanted to get up and approach him, but the co-pilot easily saw through his idea and took out a pistol from the cabinet and pointed it at him. I think you and I know it. There is no way. Dr. Parker. Richard slowly sat back in his seat, and the co-pilot locked the door of the toilet to ensure that Mary would not suddenly run out from inside. While he turned around, Richard secretly put his hand on the computer and pressed the confirmation button. The file started uploading immediately, and the co-pilot knew nothing about it. He took out an umbrella bag and put it on his back. At this time, Mary Parker in the toilet found that she couldn't open the door and shouted, "Richard! Richard!" The co-pilot ignored Mary and closed Richard's computer and took it away. Richard wanted to stop him, but didn't dare to move because of his gun. They say you are a genius, but if you think you can escape, you are a bit stupid. OMG. Uncle Ben and Aunt May looked at this scene in horror. Richard and his friends actually encountered such a thing. They never knew what happened to them. "Peter, are you okay?" Gwen grabbed Parker's hand. Parker's heavy breathing at this time showed his unrest. "I'm fine. Don't worry." Parker took 2 deep breaths, calmed down his mood a little, and patted Gwen's hand. Harry looked at this scene with a serious face. During this period, he had been busy dealing with the affairs after Norman's death, and facing the government's accountability for the spider experiment, so he had no time to find Parker. He also knew that Richard Parker's death was closely related to Osmos Industries, but he couldn't find any useful information. McCann took advantage of the window period to do a perfect job, and there was no handle on him from the normal system records. So Harry never knew the role McCann played in this, but he knew that there must be more than just Legislator in Osmos Industries who led these things, but he didn't know who it was. Chapter 149. Just when the co-pilot was about to shoot, Mary Parker in the toilet opened the toilet door. The co-pilot looked back in surprise and then reacted very quickly and knocked Mary to the ground. "Mary!" Richard yelled and rushed forward to punch him. The two wrestled on the plane. The co-pilot wanted to shoot, but Richard grabbed his wrist and pulled it up first. The co-pilot grabbed Richard and repeatedly slammed him against the wall, then threw him to the ground. Just as he was about to shoot him, Mary hit him in the back of the head with a bottle of wine. He staggered after being hit, but still shot Mary. Richard shouted "Mary!" and rushed forward to fight with him. Because his wife was injured, Richard's angry outburst made him grab the co-pilot and keep hitting the locker. Finally, he was kicked unconscious by Richard. Richard took the gun from his hand and then looked at Mary Parker worriedly. "Mary, it's okay. It's okay. I'm here. Are you okay?" He picked Mary up and helped her sit on the chair. "You will be safe. Okay, it's okay. Can you breathe, Mary?" Richard helped her fasten her seatbelt and then put the oxygen mask on her mouth and nose, letting her breathe oxygen. But Mary pushed his hand away, gasping and saying, "Roosevelt, Roosevelt." Richard only reacted at this time and immediately turned his head to look at the laptop that fell on the ground, picked it up, plugged in the data cable, and then continued to upload data. Backing up. Backing up. "Did you hear it? Hey, wake up." Richard turned his head to comfort Mary. At this time, Mary was in unbearable pain and began to lose consciousness. "We will be fine. You know, I'm by your side." Richard was still encouraging Mary, but the co-pilot woke up at some point and threw him to the ground. Then he rode on him and punched him hard. At this time, because of the sudden turbulence, the dead pilot leaned forward and pressed the steering wheel, causing the entire plane to dive. The two people who were fighting were also affected by the change from the ground to the side of the plane, but this still did not affect their fight. The co-pilot pressed Richard between the seat and the wall of the plane, and then wrapped the seat belt around his neck, trying to strangle Richard directly. At this time, Richard saw the laptop that was still uploading, and the co-pilot also saw that it showed that the data was being uploaded, so he reached out and closed the computer. Richard took this opportunity to take out the pistol and tried desperately to point the gun at the co-pilot, while the co-pilot tried desperately to resist. At this time, Richard suddenly found that Mary Parker on the side had closed her eyes and lost her breath. He looked at his wife, pointed the gun at the window, and broke it with one shot. In an instant, the air pressure in the cabin lost balance. The cabin door was sucked away by the air pressure difference in just a moment, and then hit the engine on one side, causing a violent explosion. The plane began to lose balance and dived down at high speed, with a lot of debris scattered in the air. The gun in Richard's hand was also sucked out. The co-pilot was next. He wanted to take the laptop before being sucked away. Richard immediately grabbed it tightly. In the end, the co-pilot only had time to shout no before being sucked out. Richard reopened the laptop regardless of the seatbelt strangling his neck and continued to upload data. He was relieved when he saw the progress reached 100% and the upload was successful. In the last moments of his life, Richard looked at his wife and ended his life together with a high-speed landing of the plane. Oh, no. Dad. Mom. Parker covered his face and began to cry. Gwen's eyes were red, hugged him, and patted Parker's back gently. Gwen. Thank you. Parker hugged her, and it took a while for him to stabilize his emotions and thank Gwen. Gwen didn't say anything, just shook her head gently at him, then kissed him, comforting Parker in her own way. Aunt May wiped the tears from her eyes while choking, and Uncle Ben lowered his head with a sad expression and didn't say anything. Toby Spider also looked at the sky with red eyes. The death of Garfield Spider's parents made him feel as if he saw his parents die in the same way. Although the process may be different, the result is the same, so he is also very uncomfortable. George looked serious. Since Legitrata died, he felt very guilty towards Parker because he took the initiative to hand Legitrata over to the FBI, and he felt that the other party he was partly responsible for being silenced, causing Parker to die before he even saw Legitrata. Carnes watched Richard Parker upload the data before he died. He didn't know where he uploaded it, but he knew it must be very important, otherwise he wouldn't be so nervous. He wanted to comfort Parker and tell him to find something Richard left for him. There might be clues about why Richard ran away with the results. A red spider appeared in the picture. As the camera zoomed out, Parker in a spider suit appeared in the camera. He was falling from a high altitude and wandering around the city with spider silk. While swinging, he continued to cheer. Then he saw a helicopter not far away and muttered to himself, "New York, what happened to you today?" New York number 1 reports in real time that an Osborne industrial truck carrying plutonium has been hijacked. The police are chasing it. Parker heard the helicopter's report and immediately fired spider silk to chase the truck. Okay. Time to work. At this time, the truck was running rampant on the street. The driver shouted while driving, "Come and say hello to Alexei Sisovich." Ha 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 ha. His two accomplices climbed onto the back of the truck with rifles in hand, followed by a large number of police cars. 2 police cars drove in front of the truck and tried to stop him. Alexei did not hesitate to hit the police car on the left. The tall tires ran over the police car directly. The police car on the right immediately avoided it when he saw this scene. At this time, Parker had already arrived near them. Passers-by saw Parker flying low over them and shouted, "Spider-Man. Hello. Hello." Parker also responded to them, then turned a corner at the intersection ahead and chased in the direction of the police cars. Chapter 150. Oh, shit. Alexei Sisovich's face changed immediately. He immediately realized that he would be in trouble and began to prepare to run away. "Find him for me." George was angry, and Alexei Sisovich came to his door just to vent his anger. He immediately ordered the police to arrest him. Soon, the police issued a warrant for Alexei. Parker recovered his mood under Gwen's hot kiss. At this time, the sirens suddenly sounded. The two of them stood on the rooftop and looked at the criminals whizzing past in the police cars behind. Parker asked, "Do you want to join us?" "Yeah." She nodded immediately, then took off her coat, revealing the spider suit inside. Unlike Parker's red and blue suit, Gwen's is white on the top and black on the bottom. During the period of silence of the Sky Curtain, New York citizens have already known what the gift of the Sky Curtain to Peter Parker is. After all, there is a female Spider-Man in the city, and she calls herself Ghost Spider-Man. This is not difficult to guess. Gwen has mastered her abilities. She often appears with Parker, and since Parker's true identity has been revealed, she is also very generous in showing her identity. The 2 people on the back of the truck surrounded the special explosives in a circle, and after igniting them, they easily blew a hole in the roof, revealing the plutonium inside. Parker swung a spiderweb and did a front flip to the car, then jumped to the side of the cab and knocked on the car window. Alexei was concentrating on driving, and Parker suddenly appeared and greeted him. "Is anyone there, Mr. Criminal? Hey, my name is Spider-Man. You can also call me Web-Faced Man, or Brother Super. Just don't call me Late Dinner Man. Do you hear me?" Parker was talking to Alexei non-stop, and he suddenly threw a punch. Parker shrank back with a wow, then jumped to the roof and bent down to look at him. "You don't like handshakes, so you prefer hugs?" Alexei was annoyed by his nagging, and immediately picked up a gun and pointed it at Parker and yelled, "I like killing people." "Whoa. Okay," Parker said while easily avoiding his bullets. While he was still nagging Alexei, the accomplices behind him had already started trying to put plutonium into their containers. As soon as they took it out, the computer's warning sounded automatically. "Warning. Plutonium-238 is a radioactive material, and it is very explosive. Peter, I didn't realize you talk so much." The first generation of Dr. Connors joked to Toby Spider, and the classmates in the class immediately laughed. "Oh, please. That's not me." Toby Spider waved his hand and said a little tiredly, "Who knows why this Peter Parker is so talkative?" The first generation Gwen looked at him with a smile on her face. Among the teachers in the school, only Connors dared to tease him. This kind of scene is not common. Rod couldn't help but complain, "Is this kid so talkative? This guy named Alexei is almost annoyed by him." Ha ha ha. Hearing his words, Tony couldn't help laughing. The chattering Spider-Man is okay. At the same time, he also mourned for Alexei. He had such a chattering Spider-Man. He was still committing crimes, but Garfield kept chattering in his ears. This kind of mental torture is unbearable for ordinary people. The tense face of the egghead was also a little bit stiff, especially the sentence "late for dinner." I don't know why Peter Parker can always make him laugh in various strange ways. At this time, Maximum Dylan was walking on the sidewalk with a pile of blueprints, and he kept saying, "Please make way. There's plenty of space on the sidewalk." Then he bumped into a passerby, and the blueprints fell all over the ground. Maximum quickly squatted down and started picking up the blueprints, but they were blown everywhere by the wind. Maximum shouted for help while running to the road to pick up the blueprints. At this time, Parker was still pestering Alexei. He half entered the car and laughed at him. "Is your gun jammed? Let me help you hold the steering wheel first." Parker pulled the steering wheel to control the truck. At this time, Maximum was still picking up blueprints on the road, complaining that there were too many blueprints while picking them up. Parker saw Maximum in the middle of the road ahead from a distance and came to his side by the spider web. When Maximum turned his head, Parker rescued him. "Be careful. Watch out." A taxi flew directly over his head. If it weren't for Parker, Maximum would be in great trouble. Maximum on the ground pulled up. "Okay. Safe. Are you okay?" Maximum looked at Spider-Man in front of him in shock and said in disbelief, "You are Spider-Man?" Parker nodded and said, "You can see it from the clothes. These should be very important, right, Maximum?" Parker casually stuck a few drawings on the ground with spider silk and handed them to him. "Maximum, how do you know my name?" Maximum asked in confusion while holding the drawings. Parker helped him put on his glasses. "It's written on your badge. I'm just a nobody." Maximum was a little flattered. "Hey, you're not a nobody. You're important. Lick it." Maximum obediently licked Parker's palm, and Parker used his saliva to help him comb his hair. "Okay, listen to me. I need you now. You are my eyes and ears." Parker encouraged him. "Really? Okay. Parker patted his shoulder with satisfaction. "See you next time." And then left there. "That's me." Maximum Dylan was a little unbelievable. He actually went to the sky and was even more surprised that an unknown person like him would be the one Spider-Man needed. Colleagues who knew Maximum began to talk about him. Was he needed by Spider-Man? They looked at Maximum from time to time. Most of them thought that what Parker said was just Peter Parker's encouragement to him. But even so, it still gave Maximum great encouragement. He liked Spider-Man very much, and now he liked it even more. He decided to become Peter Parker's most loyal fan. "Peter, you have to be able to encourage people." Gwen smiled at Parker while swinging on the spider silk. Yeah. Do you want to learn from me? Parker also smiled. He knew that he said those words just to encourage him, but there was nothing wrong with it. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.